All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CanCon's Corner Weekend Review. I apologize for the hiccup there in the beginning. I tried something new today. Normally, I have to have two computers. I have to have my main computer and a laptop, and the laptop is running Rumble Studio, and the main computer's running StreamYard and everything else that I'm using, the web-based and everything else. But I found a way not to have to do that. I just had a hiccup and I got it resolved. So here we are. I do apologize. In fact, you know what? Let me take a second here and go and edit my post I put on X, because that is, in fact, the wrong link. And let me just do this real quick. Bear with me for 2 seconds, guys. And there we go. Now I've got the updated link on X as well. And welcome. I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas. And I hope you guys are enjoying the weekend. This is always the best weekend, like the weekend after Christmas, unless Christmas is on a weekend. That's the worst. When Christmas is Saturday, Sunday, Christmas Eve, and Christmas, that is the worst, because then you got to get up on Monday and go to work and everything else. And that's just like, oh. But this one's actually like this, like Wednesday, Thursday is the second best. The best is Thursday, Friday, because then you've got a whole weekend to kind of recover. Although, you know what? Wednesday, Thursday is pretty good too, because Friday, like I had to work, but, you know, everybody else was off. And here we are Saturday, and everybody's gone. And the house is clean again, quiet again, and back to, I do miss the family, of course, but, you know, it's now you got a whole weekend to unwind from the month of chaos that is the Christmas holiday. And here we are. Here we are. I'm looking forward to today's show. Got a lot to cover today. As I said on X, I am probably going to hurt some feelings today, and I don't care. I really don't. So it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of people out there who are addicted to hopium, and anything that confirms that, anything that is a hopium fix, let's just call it a hopium fix. Anything that is a hopium fix, they are all over it. They are like, this is the best thing ever. And there's no discernment. Discernment goes out the window. You know, we're still going through some things over on Badlands. And the same thing happened there. There was no discernment. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, but there was no discernment. And, you know, we had to keep quiet. And then all of a sudden, the truth came out. And I don't know. There were a lot of people that you know were willing to acknowledge that they had been duped, and they didn't use discernment, and that's okay. We're still learning. All of us are still learning. I do it all the time, guys. I jump in all the time. I see a story, and I'm like, this has to be true, because I want it to be true, but it doesn't mean that it is true. And so we'll get to that. It's going to be closer to the end of the show, so I apologize for kind of propping that up and everything else, and, you know, whatever. If you guys can, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up as we get started here on Rumble. People trickling in, a little over 100 people watching now, and I deeply appreciate the thumbs up. It helps me out a lot. So the first story I want to get to today is just kind of Trump, right? And it's what Trump does. And I love that Trump is going full bore against the mainstream media. He is injecting them with that same hopium that I was just talking about. He's giving it to the mainstream media, and then he rips it away. Last week, we talked about you know, the press conference that Donald Trump was going to do, and how I think it was Tucker Carlson leaks out, hey, this press conference is probably, my sources are telling me that this press conference is going to be President Trump announcing a war with Venezuela. By the way, that's going to turn into the hurt feelings at the end of the show. But everybody's freaking out about this, myself included. I was like, there's no way he's going to do this, right? The President Trump's legacy, one of the greatest things that we take for granted, not we here, but, you know, as Americans broadly, that we take for granted with President Trump, is he's the first president to start no new wars. 4 decades worth of presidents, all with a new war under their belt. Donald J. Trump was the first one not to do that. And I admit, I was worried last week that was going to go by the wayside when Tucker came out and said, I have sources saying this is what's going to happen. And then what does President Trump do? He comes out and he announces the golden age. Essentially, he didn't say that as much. Howard Lutnick did say that as much. Howard Lutnick came out and said exactly what I said, following that speech, that this was President Trump telling you that, hey, I've laid the foundation. I've laid the foundation for what this country needs to be strong again, to be, re-onshore industry, manufacturing, to start producing things rather than just servicing one another. And he did that. And now that speech he gave last week was announcing, hey, it's time for us to start seeing the benefits of what I've built over the last year. And so then President Trump comes out with another rug. Well, first, after that speech, he goes into the most favored nation, which was one of the biggest bombshells, I think, maybe in our lifetime. He did more in that one speech, or he announced more in that one speech than Democrats and Republicans combined have done for healthcare for Americans. Biggest thing ever. So then what does President Trump do this week? Well, on December 21st, he announces a press conference with Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, and with John Fallon, Secretary of the Navy. And this, everybody's like, okay, this is the Venezuela announcement. This is where we're going to get, hey, guys, we're invading Venezuela. We're going to get those narco-terrorists. We're going to get those Maduros, right? As Maduro's out there, make peace, not war, right? And what does President Trump come out and do? He announces the Trump-class fleet of battleships, the most technologically advanced warships on the sea, and he just trolls the crap out of everybody again. He just trolls them. He is the master troller. Plain and simple. Nobody does it better than President Donald J. Trump. So I don't really have much to cover in this story. I just want to show you guys that President Trump, he knows. He knows. He builds them up and then he breaks them down. And we'll get more into some geopolitics here a little bit later on in the show. I do want to start with this. Speaking of the Trump golden age, we got this announcement from President Trump, and I did cover this on Badlands Daily, but I think it's worth a read because it's pretty good. The Trump rule, the financial news today was great. The GDP up 4.2% as opposed to the predicted 2.5. Now, it's actually reported it's 4.3. So it is interesting that he says 4.2. You would never sell yourself short. You might, exaggerate yourself a little bit, but it seems like he sold himself short, which was kind of interesting. He says, and this despite the downward pressure of the recent Democrat shutdown. But in the modern market, when you have good news, the market stays even or it goes down because Wall Street's heads are wired differently than they used to be. In the old days, when there was good news, the markets went up. Nowadays, when there's good news, the markets goes down because everybody thinks that interest rates will be immediately lifted to take care of quote unquote potential inflation. That means that essentially we can never have a great market again. Those markets from the time when our nation was building up and becoming great, strong markets, even phenomenal markets, don't cause inflation. Stupidity does. I want my new Fed chairman to lower interest rates if the market is doing well, not destroy the market for no reason. I want to have the market, the likes of which we haven't had in many decades, a market that goes up on good news and down on bad news, the way it should be and the way it was. Inflation will take care of itself. And if it doesn't, we can always raise rates at the appropriate time. But the appropriate time is not to kill rallies, which could lift our nation by 10, 15, or even 20 GDP points in a year, and maybe even more than that. A nation can never be economically great if quote unquote eggheads are allowed to do everything within their power to destroy the upward slope. We are going to be encouraging the good market to get better rather than make it impossible for it to do so. We are going to see numbers that are far more natural and far better than they've ever been before. We're going to make America great again. The United States should be rewarded for success, not brought down by it. Anybody that disagrees with me will never be Fed chair. This part right here is very promising to me. It could raise it by 15, 10, 15, even 20 GDP points. And that's a beautiful thing because, the 4.3% we just saw is for one quarter. And so if you multiply that out by 4 quarters, there's a possibility of 17.2%. 4.3 times 4 is last time I checked, 16 at 1.2, 17.2. Yeah, I was right. Don't question yourself, Brian. So 17.2% is if we stay on the track record. Now, of course, I don't think we'll stay exactly on that track record. Could go even higher. We did have a shutdown in the middle of the year. But, in general, Trump last week gives us the golden age address. That's what I'm going to call it. The welcome to the golden age. That's what I'm going to call that address. Welcome to the golden age. And then we turn around, we get the 4.3 GDP. We get a jobs report where President Trump, it's not the best jobs report. Okay. To be perfectly frank, perfectly honest, the last few jobs reports that we've had have not been the best job reports. But there is a nice underlying theme with the job reports. And that is that we are adding almost all. Trump says 100%. I don't know, only cis deal in absolutes, right? So I'm not going to go full bore on the 100%, but almost all of the jobs that we are adding now are in the private sector. Oh, that is a conservative's wet dream right there, that we are adding all jobs in the private sector. We're not bolstering fake job reports with federal government jobs. We're not adding to the bureaucracy. We're not adding to the bureaucratic bloat. We are creating these jobs in the private. That is so big. There was also a mention of the number of American citizens that are now being employed as opposed to illegals here. And that doesn't mean that, look, illegals, a lot of them work under the table. They don't have they don't have the tax ID numbers, the TINs. Or TIENs, whatever they're called. They don't have those. And so they're doing this under the table, and so be it. But the job numbers that are getting reported, through payroll and Social Security and everything else, through those records are all American citizens. And that is also a great thing. President Trump is absolutely ripping. He's just on full steam ahead right now with the economy. Financial Times put this out. U.S. economy grew at 4.3% interest, far surpassing economist expectations. The rise in GDP was boosted by consumer spending on healthcare and computing, compared with estimates of 3.2% among economists polled by Bloomberg. So again, I want to go back to Trump's True Social, where he said 4.2 and the estimate was 2.5. So, I don't know who's correct on this. Trump says 4.2, 2.5. Financial Times says 4.3, 3.2. I don't really know who's correct on that, but they're close enough. They're close enough, and I'll take it. I'll take 4.3% GDP every single day of the week. It's the highest number we've had since 2023, and that was only because we were just coming out of a pandemic. We had massive amounts of illegal immigrants coming over here and massive bureaucratic bloat from the Biden administration as they brought more people on to deal with the illegal immigration and some of the other problems that we were having in the United States. So I love it. I love it. The economic golden age. Welcome to the golden age. Trump gave the speech, and now we're seeing all the results of that coming to fruition. But it's not just the economy, guys. This has been a great story right here. Axios, U.S. murders on pace for the largest one-year drop. And again, I talked about this one on Badlands Daily with Chris Paul yesterday. It's not just murder rates that are coming down. It's all violent crime, all large crime, motor vehicle theft, down 23% from January through October. 23%. That's huge. That means 1 in 4 people that would have had a car robbed last year did not this year. That's pretty good, right? Nobody wants to wake up and get outside and getting ready to go to work and boom, your car's not in your driveway, or you come out of the grocery store and boom, your car's not in the parking lot, or you're getting gas and somebody comes up and sticks a gun in your side and jacks your car. Or I've seen a lot on the highway lately where like you see it in the movies where the guy comes out flashing a gun on the highway and like a car stops. I watched one yesterday where the guy, and we're going to play this on, I think on Y Chromes, where the guy goes out there and tries to do that and just gets leveled by the car. The car's like, I ain't slowing down, runs the guy right over. Guy gets up and ends up jacking another car. But Murder down 19.8%. Robberies down 18.3%. Burglary 14.8%. Property crime 12.3%. Violent crime 10.2%. And theft 8.9%. Rape 8.7%. And aggravated assault down 7.5%. The better question is, what's up? Is there any violent crime that's up? Because that's all good news. Media's been pretty silent on this. Axios, broke the story, and of course they have to take shots at President Trump. I told Chris Paul yesterday, I said that headline is very misleading. That headline is very misleading. Makes it sound like just U.S. murders are on pace for the largest one-year drop on record. That's great, but all violent crime, not just murder. All right. It says the decline is part of a broader decrease in violent crime following the COVID era spike. Mass killings in the U.S. also fell in 2025, reaching their lowest level in 19 years since 2006. Mass killings are down to their lowest point since 2006 and the George W. Bush era. The Real-Time Crime Index compiles the crime data from 570 law enforcement agencies and shows nearly a 20% decline in murders. The database does not consider manslaughter, self-defense, negligence, or accidental killings for the statistics, nor should they, because they're not murder. Manslaughter means that you did something that ended up causing somebody's life that would not be normally construed as murder, right? Manslaughter is you accidentally ran somebody over in a crosswalk. You didn't intentionally murder that person, but you did something negligent that ended up causing the death of another person. Self-defense should never, ever be considered murder. All right. You might call it homicide, I guess, but self-defense should never be considered murder. In fact, I think we need to start tracking self-defense a little bit better. We always see these reports come out when they talk about gun violence and everything, and they're like, oh, gun violence counts for 60,000 people. And then you see these little quiet articles that go by the wayside where it's like, yeah, guns also enabled 250,000 cases of self-defense where somebody wasn't raped or murdered or robbed. They never talk about those. They always talk about, the 50, 60, 70,000 people that die from guns every year. Also, they tend to ignore the fact that more than half of those are suicides and accidental discharges that kill people, accidental shootings. So the actual murder rate from guns is I wouldn't say it's relatively low compared to other countries, but considering the amount of guns that we have in this country, it pales in comparison. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a breakdown of the number of guns, the number of gun murders, the number of gun self-defense shootings, and compare that with other countries using the same per capita type statistics. I would love to see that data. I would love to see that. All right, let's keep going. New York City and Memphis recorded nearly a 20% drop in murders, and Chicago saw them fall by almost 28%. Can you imagine, being in Chicago right now and hearing that murders are down 28%? And why is that? Trump deployed the National Guard. Trump is deporting illegal violent criminals. What more do you need? What more do you need? Memphis also had the National Guard deployed to them. This was something I talked about on Daily as well several months back when all of the National Guard deployments were taking place. And I said what I think President Trump should do is announce a National Guard deployment in a red state, Tennessee being a red state. Now, granted, Memphis is a blue city, but all of the states that California, New York, Illinois, these are all quote unquote blue states. If Trump really wants to rustle their jimmies, send them to a red state. Send them to a red state and clean up, a violent criminal city, a violent crime safe haven, whatever you want to call it, like Memphis. Memphis is oftentimes, I'm not going to say every year, but oftentimes is at the very top of the murder rates in the United States. I think St. Louis is usually up there. Baltimore's been up there, Detroit. But Memphis is usually pretty high up there. And so to see a 20% drop in Memphis, this has got to be loved by the people in these places. Then again, I pointed this out on Daily. I apologize. I know sometimes when I do the articles from Friday, it's, a lot of you guys watch me over on Badlands, and you're like, oh, I just heard this. Yeah, well, it is what it is. I do get to do more of my own commentary here because, I don't have a co-host, which kind of sucks, but it's kind of good. I don't get to bounce ideas and hear their perspectives and all that, but I get to give my own. So here we go. Johnston County, North Carolina, and Gilbert, Arizona reported increases of 600% murder rates. I am blown away. I am blown away that Axios included this information in this report. And I said this on Friday. Gilbert, Arizona has a 600% increase in murders. In 2024, last year, Gilbert, Arizona had one single murder. You go from New York. Let me just check this on the fly. How many murders in New York City in 2024? Let's just see. You go from, let's see, New York City had 377 murders. All right. 2023, they had 391. 3.8% decline. So let's see. Let's just do the math on this real quick. Bear with me for 2 seconds, guys. I should have had this prep, but I had a lot going on this morning. 377 times 0.28 minus 377, 271 murders in New York City this year. Down 106 murders. If it's that was 28%. Excuse me. I screwed up the math. Chicago's 28. So 377 times 0.2 minus 377, 301. So from 377 to 301 compared to the decline in 2023 to 2024, which was just 14 less compared to 75. So a huge win for President Trump. But going back to the article here, Gilbert had one murder. So an increase of 600% is, I think there were 6 murders now, maybe 7. I'm not sure 100% on how that works. I mean, that could be anything. That could be 1 or 2 events, right? If there was a mass shooting, if there was, a murder-suicide where, for whatever reason, a husband or wife decides to kill the family. Like, I know it's disgusting to think about this, but my point is that that's absolutely bullshit that they include this in the story. You're talking about New York City, Chicago, Memphis, 3 major metropolitan areas. You're talking about DC, a major metropolitan area, which it says here, DC saw a 28% decline in murders this year. Also has National Guard deployed and is one of the few places where National Guard are deployed with law enforcement capacity. In all the other places, National Guard and the federal agents that are there, the National Guard is just there to protect federal property. The federal agents, not so much. So either way, guys, my point is we're not just seeing the golden age of the economy. We're seeing the golden age of, violent crime decreasing and being safe. And that was one of the promises that President Trump made to us, that he's going to make America safe again, right? I can't remember all the ones off the top of my head when he would close out his rallies. We're going to make America great again. We're going to make America safe again, strong again, fierce again, loved again, all these things. And then at the end, make America great again. So this is just another continuation of that promise to us. And I'm here for it, man. I love it. Let's go ahead and jump into our next story here. Covered this last week, and I loved hearing this. This is Scott Bessent announcing that they're going after money laundering operations down at the southern border.
At President Trump's direction, the Treasury Department is utilizing all tools to stop terrorist cartels, drug smugglers, and human traffickers. In line with that effort, I'm announcing a new data-driven border operation to help root out potential cartel-related money laundering from the U.S. financial system. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, known as FinCEN, is targeting over 100 money service businesses along the southwest border. Specifically, FinCEN is issuing 6 notices of investigation, dozens of examination referrals to the IRS, and over 50 compliance outreach letters. These businesses, which provide financial services outside of a formal bank, face elevated exposure to illicit activity, including money laundering related to drug smuggling and human trafficking. Thanks to Treasury's push for technology modernization, we are now able to implement data-driven approaches to identify potential bad actors. And when malicious activity is identified, make no mistake, we can and will take action to keep Americans safe. President Trump has made clear his commitment to securing our border, stopping the flow of deadly fentanyl, and eliminating Mexico-based drug cartels to protect Americans. Treasury will continue to use, expand advanced technology and every resource at its disposal to combat money laundering and make America safe again.
There we have it. Making America safe again, going after the drug trafficking, money laundering, southern border cartels. I don't see how anybody could be upset with any of these things. I just do not for the life of me understand that. Prioritize says, how's Tina Peters doing? We talked about this earlier in the week. She seems to be doing slightly better. And the reason for that is there's kind of a new stigma around her. You know, previously she's gotten a lot of shit because she gets all the mail, you know, and people are concerned about her and they're asking questions, and she kind of gets, it's like you don't want to be the kid when you're in boot camp in the Marine Corps. You don't want to be the kid whose mom sends them gum or candy bars or anything like that in the mail, because you're going to get crushed for it. Now, you're not allowed to eat it. They'll take it from you. But the other Marines are going to give you shit and all that stuff. Other recruits. It's the same thing in prison, I would imagine. I've never been to prison, but I would imagine it's the same thing in there. But now that the DOJ has opened this investigation into civil rights and human rights violations in Colorado prisons, they're cleaning it up, and the food's getting better. The prison's getting cleaner, and people are crediting this, from what we've been told, are crediting this to Tina Peters. And finally, she's getting some respect and admiration for the president's involvement in her case. As far as her getting out, you know, I know there's going to be a hearing this week. Ash is more privy to all this stuff, but there's going to be a hearing on I think it's on her appeal this week, and there's going to be live streams of it, so we will be covering it one way or the other, either here, Badlands, wherever. We will cover it. So yeah, that's the update on Tina right now. And you know, there's a lot of people that are trying to take away her morale. They're trying to crush her morale right now, and we're not going to let that happen. Let's talk a little bit about the Epstein files. Why not, right? Wall Street Journal puts this out. One of the documents in the second batch of Epstein files is a handwritten letter mailed to fellow sex offender Larry Nassar. Prison officials logged it in 2019 after Jeffrey Epstein's death. They claimed President Trump shared, quote, our love of young nubile girls. Roughly 30,000 pages were posted on the department's website on Tuesday, including court records and emails tied to the case against Epstein, many of which had redactions as well as documents that reference President Trump. And let's read this letter. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. I mean, it's not hilarious. It's hilariously fake and gay. Dear LN, Larry Nassar. And for those that don't know, Larry Nassar was the Olympic coach that was convicted of molesting numerous Olympians, girls, women, gymnasts, and heinous crime. Heinous, just an absolutely despicable human being. And why Jeffrey Epstein would even be writing him unless they were involved in this, you know, I would not want cross communications from one pedophile to the other. Although I don't know that Nassar was a pedophile. I don't know if the girls were under 18 or not. I can't recall. I know some of those gymnasts that compete in the Olympics are pretty young. You know, I can remember like the Carrie Struggs and Dominique Mucianos. I think they were all under 18. I don't know off the top of my head, but either way, it's a disgusting thing that he did, and he's locked up for. Dear LN, as you know by now, I have taken the short route home, the quote unquote short route home. I'm assuming this means suicide. He writes, good luck. We shared one thing, our love and caring for young ladies and the hope that they'd reach their full potential. Our president also shares our love of young nubile girls. When a young beauty walked by, he loved to, quote, grab, snatch, end quote. Whereas we ended up snatching grab in the mess halls of the system. Life is unfair. I just, truly yours, or yours, J. Epstein. I just don't understand how somebody could even think that this would be like a legitimate letter. Like the lefties, they melted down over the, look at this. President Trump is Jeffrey Epstein wrote Larry Nassar and said he loves young nubile girls and loves grabbing snatch. What? Girls from Nubia. No, nubile, nubial, right? That's how you say that. I'm not the most cunning linguist out there, but I'm pretty sure that's how you say nubile. Anyways, this is just hilarious. Absolutely hilarious that you would say something like this. And it's also fake. It is utterly fake. The U.S. Department of Justice put this out. The FBI has confirmed this alleged letter from Epstein to Larry Nassar is fake. The fake letter was received by the jail and flagged for the FBI at the time. The FBI made this conclusion based on the following facts. The writing does not appear to match Epstein's. The letter was postmarked 3 days after Epstein's death out of Northern Virginia when he was jailed in New York. The return address did not list the jail where Epstein was held and did not include his inmate number, which is required for outgoing mail. This fake letter serves as a reminder that just because a document is released by the DOJ does not make the allegations or claims within the document factual. Nevertheless, the DOJ will continue to release all material required by law. Again, I that's kind of that's kind of discouraging a little bit there, because you've got, on one hand, you've got the DOJ, granted, good for them coming out and acknowledging this is fake. You know, it was mailed from Northern Virginia. Epstein was in New York. It didn't have the prison, the inmate number or the prison's address, which are required. It was sent 3 days after he was dead. You know, all these things. It makes sense that this would be fake. The handwriting didn't match his. And the letter itself is just absolutely absurd, right? You just happen to write a very short letter to somebody saying that, hey, confessing to, we love young girls. Oh, but by the way, so did our president. And it's not fair that we're both in prison and he's not. Okay, that's bizarre. But the concerning thing about this to me is that the DOJ released this knowing that it was fake. I mean, I guess, you know, maybe if you read the Transparency Act, the Epstein Transparency Act, perhaps there's something in there that requires them to put this out, even if they know it's fake. Maybe, I guess. But good on them for coming out with it. And I wonder if we're going to see more of this, see more of the DOJ, you know, because Trump said it's a hoax. We've been saying this whole time that these letters have been sitting in custody of less than trustworthy people, in my opinion, for 5 years now, 6 years now, 7 years now, in some cases, 8 years, you know, whatever. And there's no question that you know, something so damning to President Trump potentially would be manipulated. Like, you can manipulate this so that you make it damning to President Trump. But I stand by my theory that Trump was an informant, and we got a little suggestive evidence here of this. This was from January 8th, 2020. And it's all redacted, doesn't say who it's from. We just know it's signed by an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, saying the flight records we received yesterday reflect that Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously had been reported, including during the periods that we would expect to charge in a Maxwell case. In particular, he is listed as a passenger on at least 8 flights between 1993 and 1996. Including at least 4 flights on which Maxwell was also present. On 2 other flights, 2 of the passengers, respectively, were women who would be possible witnesses in a Maxwell case. Didn't want any of this to surprise you down the road. I mean, this, so again, I don't want to rehash this whole story, but I do believe that President Trump was is an informant for at least the FBI, could go to other agencies as well. We know this to be true in Atlantic City because the FBI came out and admitted as such. We also know that in 2000, I think it was 2008, There was a story with Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs, arms traffickers, that Trump was believed to be an informant in that. Somebody sued, and the CIA's response, was it CIA? The FBI, excuse me. The FBI's response was what's called a GOMAR response, which is the I can neither confirm nor deny, which you can usually make your own assessments, because if he wasn't, you would just say flat out, emphatically no. But you can make your own assessments on that. So again, going back to this letter, it says, in particular, he's listed as a passenger on at least 8 flights between 93 and 96, including 4 flights on which Maxwell was also present, and that these are the periods that we would expect to charge in a Maxwell case. And they ultimately did charge those periods in a Maxwell case. And wouldn't you know that Donald Trump just happened to be on the plane with Maxwell and Epstein during that time frame? And the letter here, the charges, this is from January of 2020. You're telling me the Southern District of New York, if they had evidence against President Trump and that he was, involved criminally in the Epstein cases, you're telling me in 2020 they wouldn't have pursued that? This is one of the more glaring pieces of evidence right here that President Trump is the informant, the dog that hasn't barked, which Epstein and Maxwell were trying to figure out 10 years after the Virginia Giuffre case, when they mention in that letter that was released a month ago that Virginia Giuffre is the woman that Trump was alone in the house with. The Virginia Giuffre, who also testified that Trump never was anything other than gentlemanly towards her. Never made any advances, nothing. This letter right here does not do what they think they are. But you got morons like this guy, Keith Edwards. Who is he? Democracy enjoyer, YouTube, always cold. Holy shit, more Epstein files were uploaded and accidentally leaked. In one email, an assistant U.S. attorney writes that Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's plane. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, these people, I mentioned the hopium earlier. This is their hopium. This is the Democrats' hopium. Full stop. They want this so bad to be a got Trump. And just every time we see something come up on this, it's a nothing burger. At best for them, it's a nothing burger. At worst for them, it's evidence that he is the informant. On 2 other flights, 2 of the passengers were women who would be possible witnesses in a Maxwell case. So you have 2 witnesses against Maxwell. Trump's on the plane with them, and they didn't say anything about President Trump? That's interesting. Didn't want any of this to be a surprise down the road. So there it is. The Epstein nothing burger. President Trump truthed out a retruth of his Christmas post yesterday saying, we just found 1 million more documents, and now we're going to be concerned. The DOJ is going to be even more wrapped up in this Epstein story than they are in election fraud. Like, we're distracting. That's why, I can't say definitively that's why, but perhaps that's why President Trump is egging people so bad to forget about the Epstein stuff, at least for now. Because if we can clean up the elections before 2026 and we can actually get people in Congress, people in elected positions that aren't going to toe the line for the establishment, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. They're not going to go to D.C. and get corrupted. They're not going to go to D.C. and get, rolled up in a blackmail scheme like Epstein was putting on and like all these others were putting on. And we might actually be able to effectuate some change and some movement in this. But in the meantime, what is the most important thing moving forward? Elections. Nothing is more important. Ash asked me this. Somebody asked me this. I can't remember who in a Rumble rant yesterday. They asked, "What's more important to you, election fraud or getting convictions on Epstein?" And I said, "It's definitely election fraud, because the one leads to the other. The other does not lead to the other, but the one leads to the other. Election fraud leads to Epstein convictions. Epstein convictions do not necessarily lead to election fraud exposure. Doesn't work." But now we've got 1 million more documents that the DOJ has to sit there and go through and redact and everything else, and taking more and more time away from people that could be working on things that are pertinent to our future rather than correcting our past. We'll see. Do the shenanigans with Jeffrey Epstein end with that letter? No, it gets even more absolutely ridiculous. I don't even know what the DOJ was doing in this, but the DOJ released this video right here, dated as, I think it's dated October 10th, September 10th, 2019. And this is supposed to be a digital recreation of Jeffrey Epstein hanging himself. What the hell? I'm going to not use the F word there. What the crap is this? The only thing that I could possibly think they're trying to do with this is send a message. And what is that message? Well, first and foremost, maybe that's a piece of cloth right there. There's a little orange blur right here. It's highly pixelated. Let me see if I can put this on. No, it doesn't even have a higher resolution. Maybe that's supposed to be a rope right there and that he's hanging himself by sitting on his knees. You can't do that, guys. You can't do that. Human beings have an instinct not to die. Even if we want to die, it is our, natural inclination not to die. And you're telling me this guy was able to hang himself on his knees? And conveniently, this rope is just sitting over here like, hey, that probably would have been beneficial to try and hang yourself with. They've got this black rope over here, whatever that is. No, we're not going to use that. We're just going to use some thin bed sheets and just kind of sit there on our knees and choke ourselves out until we die. What? That is absolutely absurd. And then, of course, we can get into the autopsy. The hyoid bone was broken, which is usually indicative of a strangling. The strangling, the bruising around his neck goes straight back instead of up his jawbone. There's all sorts of things. The camera's going out and all that stuff. This is just, I don't know what to make of this. This is just really strange. Really strange. All right, let's keep moving here. What's another interesting story from this week? Oh, this Politico story was nuts. Ash and I covered this, I think, on Wednesday, on Christmas Eve. And I don't want to go as in depth on this story as we did on Wednesday. If you want to see that, go back in Badlands Media, Badlands Daily on Christmas Eve. We did probably half an hour on this story. From Politico, acting CISA director failed a polygraph. Career staff are now under investigation. And again, let me summarize this story. There's a guy named Gadamukala. He's the current acting deputy. He's the deputy director of CISA. He's the current acting director of CISA because Congress has not yet confirmed Sean Planke, who is the Trump appointee, because I don't know what the Senate is doing. The Senate can take their Christmas vacations and they can take all this other shit, but they can't get out there and confirm Trump's appointees. Maybe it's as if President Trump is trying to expose the speech and not speech and debate clause, the advise and consent of the Senate in his nominations. If they're taking this long, we're already a year past his election victory, quote unquote victory. I don't think any elections are necessarily free and fair, including his. But we're less than a month away from his first year in office, and he still doesn't have the acting director for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That's a pretty important agency. If it, when it's doing their quote unquote job and ensuring that our critical infrastructure is shored up and safe, that's a pretty damn important agency, and Trump can't get his nominee through. So basically what happened here is a bunch of subordinates to Gadamukala made him take a polygraph test, a counterintelligence polygraph test, because this super secret spy agency, who we don't know which three-letter agency it was, whether it's No Such Agency or the CIA, came in and brought some highly sensitive cyber intelligence and gave it to CISA. And they're like, okay, if you want to look at this, you have to pass a counterintelligence polygraph. Now, the DHS has said, hey, we are in charge of this agency, and you don't get to come in here and give unsanctioned polygraph tests to people. President Trump appointed as the acting director, Gadu Makala. Kristi Noem worked with him in South Dakota in IT, and she stands behind him. And that's all he needs. That's all he needs. He isn't some low-level GS, 12 or 13 or whatever that needs to get a security clearance in order to be read in on all these things. Gadu Makala does not have to take a polygraph from some three-letter agency in DHS in order to see stuff that his subordinates are allowed to see. He runs that agency. Nobody is on a higher need-to-know basis than him. The problem is, and this is just my opinion here, but the problem is previous directors have not wanted to see this kind of evidence or these kinds of reports and intelligence. And perhaps that's because they want plausible deniability. They want to be able to say, well, we didn't know anything about this. I never saw it. This was all my low-level guys that were doing this, and they're just low-level guys. You don't want to arrest them and ruin their lives over this. So just kind of forget about this. Gadu Makala was like, nah, I want to see it. And so they made him take a polygraph, an unsanctioned polygraph test. Tricia McLaughlin, DHS spokeswoman, says, quote, an unsanctioned polygraph test was coordinated by staff misleading incoming CISA leadership. The employee in question were placed on administrative leave pending conclusion of an investigation. We expect and require the highest standards of performance from our employees and hold them directly accountable to uphold all policies and procedures. Gadu Makala has the complete and full support of the secretary and is laser focused on returning the agency to its statutory mission. When asked for clarification on what is considered unsanctioned, McLaughlin said that random bureaucrats can't just order a polygraph. Polygraph orders have to come from leadership who have the authority to order them. Now, there were some key points in this article that just shocked me and Ash, both of us. Let's see. I think this was one of the most shocking ones here. The test was scheduled that month to determine his eligibility to review one of the most sensitive intelligence programs shared with CISA by another spy agency, according to 3 current officials and 1 former official. Where in the hell do you come off saying that the acting director of the agency has to be determined to be eligible to read the intelligence that a 3-letter spy agency shared with them? That's highly concerning. It goes on to say senior staff raised questions about whether Gadu Makala needed to review the intelligence. Senior staff, meaning his subordinates. He's the highest seniority in CISA. He's the director, the acting director, and the deputy director. So until Sean Planke is sworn in, he is the highest. Once Planke is sworn in, he's the second highest. So to say senior staff raised questions about whether he needed to review the intelligence on at least 2 occasions, but he continued to push for the access even if it meant taking the polygraph, that's bonkers. That is absolutely bonkers. In early June, a senior agency official did not approve an initial request signed by mid-level CISA staff to grant Gadu Makala access to the program. What the fuck is going on in CISA? You have subordinates that are determining what the acting director can see, what the deputy director can see. This is all because it's Trump. If this was not Donald Trump, first and foremost, if it was, going back to quote unquote Joe Biden or Barack Obama, well, CISA didn't really exist under Barack Obama, but DHS, same concept. If this was, any other president, the director would either be given immediate access, right? Or they would just ignore it. Now we have a president that is being denied the immediate access when the director wants to know. It's almost like, there's shenanigans going on in the subordinates And, it's just kind of a deep state that's underneath them running the whole show. And they don't want the top dog to be aware of this, because then he'll actually have to do something. He'll have to report to the president on this. He'll have to report to Kristi Noem on this. And they don't want that. Now, CISA is very important, because you guys remember, CISA is the one that came out immediately and said it's the most secure election ever, all because all of the election partners under CISA in their advisory panel, I don't remember the exact name of it, told them, yes, this is a statement you should make. And Chris Krebs went out there, carried their water, and said that. Third, the current official only set a number of agency staff are allowed to review the program. Excuse me. A third current official said that only a set number of agency staff are allowed to review the program, and is traditionally the agency's Senate-confirmed director who chooses who those people would be. Well, until that Senate gets off their ass and confirms Plan Key, it's Gadum Kala. Like it or not, it's Gadum Kala. The senior official who denied that read-in request was placed on administrative leave for a reason unrelated to the polygraph. Gadum Kala, quote, had trusted advisors he could have leaned on, and he didn't, said the third current official. In other words, you had subordinates that needed to know about this, but you didn't need to know about this. You just cover your eyes and say, I'm just here for the paycheck. I'm just the appointed director. I only run the whole agency. I don't need to see any of this. I've got young jackoffs that can do all this for me. Are we starting to see how bad the deep state actually is and how deep it actually goes? I had a good friend of mine that's intimately involved in all of this right now. And, he told me the other night, he says, you have no idea how bad the deep state actually is. And he's got a bird's eye view of it right now. And he said, it's far worse than you could ever imagine. Less highly classified versions of the requested intelligence would have been available to Gadum Kala without taking a polygraph. Gadum Kala, quote, asked to see the intelligence, end quote, and only later started claiming he was, quote unquote, just doing what career staff told him to do. This story is so fucking bad. So bad. It's either utter nonsense or it's utter corruption. It's one of the two. Either Politico is just making shit up and putting out propaganda for these officials who have been fired in order to get them reinstated and garner public sympathy for them, saying that we were just doing our jobs by subverting the acting director, but we were just doing our jobs. Those interviewed could not say definitively why Gadum Kala didn't pass the July polygraph, and several cautioned that people may fail the examinations. People may fail the examinations for innocuous reasons such as anxiety or a technical error. Polygraph results are not reliable enough to be admitted as evidence in most U.S. courts. In other words, what they're saying right here is, we don't even know if Gadum Kala failed this test because, maybe we wanted him to fail it, or maybe he was just really nervous because, we have no idea what we're about to tell him. He has no idea what he's about to be told. And, yeah, he just failed it. Could be a mistake, but we're going to use that mistake and keep the acting director from viewing critical intelligence. At least 6 career staff who were involved in scheduling and approving the test were informed in letters that then acting secretary, we can skip that. Everybody that was involved with this was let go, essentially, put on administrative leave. So I read this on Wednesday, and I went through these names here. Jeffrey Conklin, CISA's chief security officer. It says the staffers placed on leave included both junior and senior officials, including Jeffrey Conklin, CISA's chief security officer. This article is purporting to be from July. The article's new, but the story is reportedly from July. Jeffrey Conklin was brought in from USCIS, United States Customs and Immigration Services, in July of 2025. So this guy was literally brought in, and before he even has a security badge, he's already telling the director, no, you can't see this intelligence. That's very odd to me. That is very odd to me. Masoom Chaudhry, the agency's deputy chief of staff, I looked into her. She goes back to the Obama era DHS. I think she was also with USCIS. She goes from there she makes it through the Trump administration. Let me check her LinkedIn again real quick because I want to make sure I don't give mis and disinformation on this. So let me just double check. All right, here's her LinkedIn. And let's share this out. Here we go. So she went to James Madison University, American University. She starts as a program analyst and a writer/editor. She starts as a writer/editor in 2012. That's under Obama. In 2015, she becomes a program analyst and leaves in March of 2020, right after COVID started, or right when COVID started. Then she moves to senior intelligence research specialist at USCIS. So I was correct on that. March 20th through April 2021. It's funny. That's right as quote unquote, Joe Biden was winning the election and right into his administration when the borders opened wide. She was deputy executive secretary at CISA from April 2021 through December 2022, followed by executive secretary from December 2022 through April 2024. And she's deputy chief of staff from April 2024, still the Biden admin, through present. So she survived the Trump administration, to be fair. You know, we always kind of tend to think that, you know, if these are political people, but she survived the Trump administration. And then goes on to work for CISA during the Biden admin. Stand by one. Let me see where I'm going to go next with this. Actually, you know what? We should probably talk about a sponsor here. So, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's talk about a sponsor. And first up, guys, let's talk about our friends over at Emerald Med. I want to share this quick story about a family that's supporting this channel. Their father had a rare form of cognitive decline due to his military service that made him unable to work. Their mother had stopped working, and as she had to take care of him. Their sons discovered a new U.S. Library of Medicine study on various mushroom blends that could significantly support cognitive function. So they began creating a complex mushroom supplement based on that research, not just to help their own family, but to help others. They nearly quit after multiple setbacks and having their first big batch stolen. Fast forward, and now they speak at medical conventions nationwide. Their company is called Emerald Med, and their product massively supports brain, immune, blood, and heart function. Your cognitive function optimizes everything that you do. You can get knees, heart, and kidneys replaced, but you cannot get a new brain. So investing in the only brain you'll have for the rest of your life matters. If you want to support a company that supports our channel, my channel, and free speech with their marketing, and you want to try a strong mushroom supplement, they're running a Christmas deal. Just click the link below and use the promo code for 30% off today. It's currently the most concentrated mushroom gummy in the U.S. It has up to 400 compounds and is rich in vitamins and minerals with 6 formulas in one. It's like getting 6 supplements for the price of one. You can click the link below to try Emerald Med's mushroom gummies for 30% off today. And deep thank you to Emerald Meds. I very much can sympathize with that story. Very much can sympathize with that story. It very much reminds me of my own. All right, let's jump back into the news and let's talk about some of the courts that Trump has been dealing with over the last week. This is from Politico again. This is actually the only person that writes at Politico that I have a shred of respect for, and that's Kyle Cheney. Not because I agree with him on anything, but I think he does a pretty fair job overall of reporting, these court cases. And even if he doesn't do, like, his writing isn't a fair job, he always posts the source documents so you can read them, and mainly on X, not so much in his articles. So this one here, Supreme Court blocks Trump effort to deploy National Guard troops to Illinois. Very deceptive headline. I will say that. In their ruling, the Supreme Court, in their ruling on Tuesday, the justices noted that federal law generally bars the use of the military for law enforcement and declared that the Trump law used to activate the Guard is likely to only apply when regular armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, are sufficient to maintain order. So the Supreme Court, it sounds like they're saying, hey, Trump, don't use the National Guard. Send in the Marines. Don't use the Guard. Send in the Marines. Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch dissented. Kavanaugh declined to join the majority's explanation on the ruling. The decision is not a final one on the legal issue at stake in the National Guard deployments, but it is a significant setback for the president. Districts and appeal courts judges have also sharply rejected Trump's bid to borrow National Guard troops from cooperative red states and send them into Democrat cities and states over the objection of the governors and mayors. But the Supreme Court did not weigh in on this. Now, also in this article, CNN did a pretty decent job talking about it. And I want to read here, the White House spokeswoman, Abigail Jackson, told CNN that, quote, he activated the National Guard to protect federal law enforcement officers and to ensure rioters did not destroy federal buildings and property. Nothing in today's ruling detracts from that core agenda. So it sounds like, the ruling is that they can't do law enforcement. And Abigail Jackson saying that's fine. They're not doing law enforcement. They're not going out there and getting in cop cars and arresting people. No, they're standing at federal building on federal property, protecting the federal property. You can't riot out front of it, right? And if you do, you can't be chucking fire bombs and Molotov cocktails and everything else at the building. And if you do that, then you're going to have to deal with the National Guard. They're not in law enforcement. They're protecting federal property, which is exactly what the National Guard should be doing. Federal law allows the president to federalize the National Guard when he can no longer execute the laws of the United States with quote unquote regular forces. And that's a big question they have. A debate cropped up during the case about whether the term regular forces meant the regular military or federal agents. In its order, the court said that the term quote unquote likely refers to standing military. To be honest with you, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you here. That makes no sense to me. The Supreme Court, it sounds like, is saying that President Trump should have used the full-blown Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force to do this. Well, not Coast Guard because they're DHS, but should have used those four branches of the military first before the National Guard. That does not make much sense to me. I'm not going to lie. Quote, thus, at least in this posture, the government has not carried its burden to show that the law at issue in the case, quote, permits the president to federalize the Guard in the exercise of inherent authority to protect federal personnel and property in Illinois. Again, the government has not carried its burden to show that, and then it cuts there. I really would like to read the rest of that sentence. It does not permit the president to federalize the Guard in exercise of inherent authority. I don't know. I can't imagine that that's correct. But Alito, Thomas, they joined in the dissent, saying the courts failed to explain why the president's inherent constitutional authority to protect federal officers and property is not sufficient to justify the use of National Guard members in the relevant area for precisely that purpose. Alito wrote, I am not prepared at this point to express a definite view on these questions, but I have serious doubt about the correctness of the court's view. Alito argued that his colleagues had, quote, no basis for rejecting the president's determination that he was unable to execute the federal immigration laws using the civilian law enforcement resources at his command. Whatever one may think about the current administration's enforcement of the immigration laws or the way that ICE has conducted its operations, the protection of federal officers from potentially lethal attacks should not be thwarted. Goes on to say the court took an unusually long time to resolve the emergency dispute, which the Trump administration first brought to the court in mid-October. Given the unusual amount of back and forth between the justices in Tuesday's order, it appears likely the court's conservative majority wrestled with how to resolve the case. Now, I said when I covered this earlier in the week, I said I don't necessarily think that it's beyond the realm of possibility that the Supreme Court allowed Trump, by taking a long time, allowed Trump to do what he needed to do with the National Guard in those places and get it under control. And they acknowledge in that article that the deployments are mostly winding down. They've got it under control and it's mostly winding down. And now all of a sudden you get the Supreme Court out there saying that the president maybe didn't have this authority. And I wonder if first off, I wonder if there's going to be a continuation because, like I said, this is going to get remanded back down and they'll have to distinguish between law enforcement and protecting federal property. But more importantly, I wonder if this is just to ensure that another president down the road can't do the same thing. I also think this could potentially lead to President Trump declaring the Insurrection Act. And if he declares the Insurrection Act, the Supreme Court's hands are ultimately tied behind their back because the law from Congress does not define what an insurrection is. It does not define an insurrection, a rebellion, or an invasion. These things are not defined. And so the president has the plenary authority to define what he believes to be one of those three things and can deploy the National Guard as such. And so I think there's a possibility that not only does the Supreme Court here give him incentive to deploy the to initiate the Insurrection Act, but also perhaps it's giving him the authority to initiate the Insurrection Act and deploy regular forces, meaning Marines, Army, Air Force, and Navy. I don't know, Navy, I would think it would be more like corpsmen with the Marines and SEALs and that kind of thing. But Army and Air Force, I would imagine like PJs maybe. But I don't know. This was an interesting one. It is definitely a setback. There's no question about that. It is a setback. But yeah, we'll see where this goes from there. I want to just real quick get caught up here and get squared away a little bit. Are we ready to get into election stuff? Not just yet. Not just yet. This was a fascinating article here from the AP. Judge says Trump administration must restore disaster money to Democratic states. Federal judge blocked the Trump administration, their attempt to reallocate federal homeland security funding away from states that refuse to cooperate with certain federal immigration enforcement. Judge Mary McElroy solidified a win for the coalition of 12 attorneys general after being alerted that their states would receive drastically reduced federal grants due to their sanctuary jurisdiction. DHS and FEMA reduced more than $233 million from Connecticut, Delaware, D.C., Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington. The money was part of a $1 billion program where allocations are supposed to be based on assessed risk, with states then largely passing most of the money on to police and fire departments. Where does a judge from Rhode Island, a district judge from Rhode Island, after the ruling in D.C. last year or earlier this year, that basically said that a district judge cannot issue an injunction nationwide, but only in their district? Where does this judge come off ruling that the Trump administration has to return money to Connecticut, Delaware, D.C., Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington? They have no authority. Supreme Court determined this. This is Supreme Court precedent that they don't have that authority. Even if you were to say, well, the president's in D.C. and they're going after the president. Yeah, but this judge is in Rhode Island. That's not D.C.'s district. It's not the same district. Quote, what else could defendants' decisions to cut funding to specific counterterrorism programming by conspicuous round numbers be, if not arbitrary and capricious? Neither a law degree nor a mathematics degree is required to deduce that no plausible rational formula could produce this result, McElroy wrote. How about you're gonna cut specific counterterrorism programming because they won't allow federal agents to come in and do their jobs on counterintelligence? You're not allowing these, these are sanctuary states and sanctuary cities that are suing here. And if they're going to buck against the federal government and tell them that they can't enforce the president's constitutional authority to repel an invasion, then you don't get money. Period. You can't sit there and say we're going to ignore federal law and then be like, hey, federal government, give me money. I don't care Donald Trump should just tell this judge to F off. I'm not doing it. You can't force me to send money to states that are refusing to follow federal law and not honor the president's constitutional obligations to repel an invasion. Quote, defendants' wanton abuse of their role in federal grant administration is particularly troublesome given the fact that they have been entrusted with the most solemn duty, safeguarding our nation and its citizens. How about the governors and mayors that are not safeguarding their nation and citizens? And I'm not just talking about against physical violence. I'm talking about rental rates that they can't afford because the rental market is booming because of all these migrants that are receiving subsidies through NGOs and through the government and through the USAID and everyone else. They're getting all of their expenses and everything paid for. Meanwhile, Americans are struggling because their rents are going from $1,000, $1,200 all the way up to $2,000-$3,000 for the same properties because there's an explosion. The government is paying for these subsidies through NGOs, right? It's not like they're giving it directly to them, and although in some cases they are. In some cases they absolutely are. But they're giving it to these NGOs who are then paying for these things. And a lot of these illegals are taking up housing that would otherwise be occupied by Americans. Supply and demand, markets of elasticity. It's going to go up. The more people demanding one product, the more that product's value increases. So you want to talk about safeguarding your citizens? Those sanctuary governors, those sanctuary mayors, they're the ones that should be safeguarding their citizens, and they're doing the exact opposite. They're welcoming in an invasion of illegals who do not represent the United States and are not American citizens, and they're letting them take resources from Americans, and they're allowing them to harm Americans both physically and financially. Piss off with this ruling. This is probably the worst ruling I think I've seen. And this is coming from the AP, which is going to try and slant it against Trump, of course. McElroy writes on, quote, while the intricacies of administrative law and the terms and conditions on federal grants may seem abstract to some, the funding at issue here supports vital counterterrorism and law enforcement programs, and they continue to allow those law enforcement and counterterrorism to be just absolutely destroyed by illegal immigration. To hold hostage funding for programs like these based solely on what appears to be defendants' political whims is unconscionable and, at least here, unlawful, the Rhode Island-based judge wrote in her ruling. And then she goes on to invoke the Brown University shooting, saying that if this funding was available, the Brown University shooting might not have happened. I don't know. I mean, maybe if the guy wasn't an illegal Portuguese immigrant in the United States since 2000, on a student visa that dropped out in 2002 and then decided to come back years and years later, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't happen then. Maybe if, we only allowed American citizens and green card holders into the country and actually enacted those laws and kicked those people out when their time is up, I don't know. If you're going to sit there and say and put the blame on President Trump for Brown University, yeah, F all the way off. That's the alternative argument. It's not necessarily the argument that I would make. But yeah. Do I sometimes have a lisp? Sometimes, I guess. This mic picks up S sounds and P sounds very strong, this mic, especially when I talk really close to it like this. If I talk really close, then it does it all the time. But no, I generally do not have a lisp. Yeah, so again, so this also, there was another story this week out of Colorado. And Colorado, Trump is refusing to pay for, I think it's the Western Slope. There's some summertime damages from flooding and a fire that they were requesting federal assistance for, and Trump said no. And this is what he needs to do. And this ruling from that judge. What was her name? Myron. What was her name again? You should probably remember this judge's name. McElroy. I'll remember that. It's from golf. Rory McIlroy. I'll remember that now. Yeah, there was a story similar to this out of Colorado where some cities are pretty pissed off. Coloradans pretty pissed off that Trump is denying them FEMA funding to rebuild from the summer. The governor, Jared Polis, is furious about it, of course. But you know what? Piss off once again. You guys are a sanctuary state. You have sanctuary cities throughout your state. You're holding a political prisoner. You won't let us inspect the election machines. You're ignoring the 14th Amendment with Jenna Griswold, who had 62 out of 64 counties. Might be off on that. Is it 60 out of 61, 61 out of 62, whatever it is? Almost every single county in Colorado had their BIOS passwords online, active BIOS passwords that could be used to manipulate and steal elections. And Jenna Griswold got nothing. She didn't even get a slap on the wrist. She got like a 20-minute humiliation ritual on social media, and then the mainstream media completely ignored it and forgot about it. Meanwhile, Tina Peters is in jail for 9.5 years for lying to an equally elected official, right? Tina Peters was an elected official. She lied. She didn't even lie to Jenna Griswold. She lied to bureaucrats that worked for Jenna Griswold. And when I say lie, I use that term very loosely as well. She could not declare the identity of Conan Hayes because I believe Conan Hayes was a federal agent and or at least an asset, and could not be disclosed as who he actually was. And so she had to deceive them and expose them. She exposed them. And she's going to have vindication for everything, I think. The only problem with that is she's had 1.5 years of her life taken away from her now. And as she gets towards the end of her life, she just turned 70 and, getting close. Every day at that point is a gift. Well, every day is always a gift from God. But at that point, every day is a gift. And she won't ever get that time back. All right, let's go ahead and talk about, what are we at? We're at 1:18. We could talk briefly about this story. Just the News put this out. I didn't get to cover this on Friday. I did for like 30 seconds. Judge orders California to stop hiding gender transition from parents and disclose parental rights. U.S. District Judge Roger Benitez granted summary judgment to parents and teachers against the state's so-called gender secrecy policies, which allegedly conceal conceal from parents their children's gender identity at odds with sex, including by muzzling employees. The judge approved their motion for a class-wide permanent injunction 2 months after certifying a class and 4 subclasses, and a month after threatening to sanction officials for misleading Benitez, that's the judge, by falsely claiming that the state was no longer enforcing gender secrecy policies so that he would then moot the case. You want to talk about the lawfare that's been raised against Jeffrey Clark and Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman and Rachel Alexander and, Matt DePerno and Stephanie Lambert and Kurt Olson and all these other lawyers out there fighting against election integrity. And, the lawfare that they waged against Ash and Colonel Smith and Holly Holly at Altitude. I don't want to say her last name, although it's public record. When you look at that lawfare and the sanctions and the disbarments, and then you see this here where the judge was misled by I think it was the Attorney General's office, that they're no longer doing this. Just moot the case. We're no longer doing this. And the whole time they were still doing it. Holy shit. Holy shit. These district judges need to grow some balls and start throwing these up to the bar and getting these lawyers disbarred. The injunction prohibits the using the state constitution, statutes, and quote-unquote regulations or guidance. That's a big one. That's bureaucracy speak right there. So state constitution, that's supremacy clause, right? The state's constitution is above state law. Statutes, that's the legislative. That's the bunch of people that are elected to make law by us. They're given our consent to make laws. And guys, I know elections are fake and gay. I get that. But these are the people that are, quote unquote, elected to make laws. And that's fair. That's fair that they're doing that. But then the regulations and guidance, or the newly produced PRISM cultural competency training to mislead parents about their children's gender presentation at school. Regulations and guidance is not law. Regulations and guidance is bureaucrats' interpretation of law and their own spin on it. And nobody elected bureaucrats to do those things. And this is part of Gorsuch's overruled. This is part of Chevron deference. This is part of what was the other ruling we just saw last week? Ash and I talked about it. I can't remember it. But the Supreme Court is chiming in on this big time, on these bureaucracies making laws that have criminal and civil sanctions against Americans and holding them accountable for this. It bans them from using a children's preferred names and gender pronouns that, quote, do not match the child's legal name and natal pronouns when the parent, quote, has communicated their objection to such use. And from that story, we'll jump over here to this one in Oregon. Oregon leads lawsuit over Kennedy's efforts to ban gender-affirming care for minors. This one kind of turns into that. This kind of aligns with the AP article we just did on Rhode Island about, or excuse me, not AP. It was AP, right? Yeah, where they're withholding the money. So this is along the same lines. Attorney General Dan Rayfield of Oregon, is suing federal government over efforts to bar gender-affirming care for minors by stripping federal funding. The lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court in Eugene includes 18 other Democratic states and Washington, D.C., targets a proposal to bar hospitals from participating in Medicare and Medicaid if they provide care, including puberty blockers or surgeries for transgender children and teens. Under a landmark 2023 law, Oregon requires commercial insurers and the Oregon Health Plan and the state's Medicaid plan to cover gender-affirming care, including for minors. Now, who has the supremacy clause here? The federal government or the state government? I don't know, but it's not a law. HHS is not passing a law. HHS is saying this is our policy. If you want our funding, you will follow our policy. If you don't want our funding, you don't have to follow our policy. You can transgender all the kids you want in Oregon, but we're not going to pay for it. And we're not going to give you any money, is what they're saying. That's different than enforcing, rules and regulations. Again, I'm not a big fan of the bureaucracy, but at the same time, I understand that the bureaucracy can serve a purpose. Kennedy's proposal goes beyond banning Medicaid coverage for gender-affirming care for minors. It also seeks to block hospitals or doctors that provide such care from participating in Medicare or Medicaid entirely. So Kennedy is saying that we're not just not going to fund the transgender and gender-affirming care for minors. If you do it, we're not going to fund you at all. No Medicare, no Medicaid for your entire state if you're going to use it to transition kids. I stand with that 100%. All right, let's start moving into the election stuff. I'm going to try and keep this to 2 hours, but I will probably be unsuccessful. So I hope you guys don't mind if I go longer. If you do, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and talk about another sponsor, though, here for the show. New research says over 80% of Americans and 3/4 of Trump voters support America First international assistance. According to a new poll by McLaughlin, one of President Trump's pollsters, Americans across the country support assistance designed to root out fraud, tamp down terrorism, and secure our borders, support our small farmers, and feed starving children. And over 70% of Trump voters believe that President Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize if he creates a world where almost no child starves to death. This is the type of assistance that we can get behind. Many people will try to stop him, but only President Trump can turn America First international assistance into a reality. If he does it, a Nobel Prize will be in his future. All right. Let's keep moving along. Yeah, let's keep moving along. I did have one story here that was pretty interesting. DOJ sues DC over ban of semi-automatic firearms. DOJ called the list of firearms protected under the Second Amendment but banned in DC as an unconstitutional incursion into the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens seeking to own protected firearms for lawful purposes. The DOJ stated that by refusing to register protected firearms, the district is forcing residents to sue to protect those rights. The 2008 Supreme Court decision in Heller versus DC, the High Court decided that the Second Amendment protects the rights of individuals to keep guns in their homes for self-defense. According to the lawsuit, the district has established a pattern and practice of ignoring Heller. According to Metropolitan Police Department website, banned firearms include sawed-off shotguns, machine guns, short-barreled rifles, 50 cal BMG rifles, assault weapons, as defined by DC code. So DOJ doing a little bit of work on the Second Amendment front. I will stand with all of that. Time for elections. And let's start off with this clip here from everybody's favorite hair plugs, Jamie Raskin.
I believe that ranked choice voting will dramatically reduce negative politics in America and promote positive politics. Now, why is that? So say the three of us were all running to be the senator in Vermont. Okay, so right now the incentives are I've got to trash these two wonderful candidates, even in my own primary.
And you'll do it if you have to.
And I would do it if I've got to, right? And everybody's got skeletons, and so I'm just going to spend all my time making them sound bad. But under ranked choice voting, the incentives are the reverse. The incentives are to say, you love Don Beyer, you love Peter Welch, I love those guys too. If you can't vote for me first, if you want them number one, make me number two, or make me your number 3 out of 29, or whatever. And then as the lower candidates are eliminated, the votes get redistributed. So we have people we serve with in the House of Representatives from Maine, and people we've served with from Alaska. And I think you served with Mary Peltola too before you went over to the Senate, Peter, who were elected. They came in second in the first round, but nobody had a majority. And when the votes were redistributed, they catapulted ahead. Why? Because they built a coalition between Democrats and independents.
This, again, you just go back and watch Why We Vote. We've covered ranked choice voting so many times on this show. Alaska has it. Hawaii, I think, had it or has it. They might be getting rid of it. Do not let them go to ranked choice voting, guys. As bad as our elections are right now, if we let ranked choice voting, if we let ranked choice voting seep into our system, it'll be far worse. New York has it, and I think in the primaries, not in the general election. Raskin is trying to tell you that, it'll make politics so much more civil. No, it will make politics so much more establishment. The more money you throw at your race, it will no longer allow the grassroots competition to win. And that's on both sides of the aisle. There are grassroots people on the left. There are grassroots on the right. There are grassroots on the left. If we go to ranked choice voting, you will not see any more of those ranked choice voters win, because what's going to happen is the grassroots person might have a 55% majority and or say a 45% majority, right? That's not enough to get them over that 50% threshold. And so then what will happen then is that whoever's the next person down, the other grassroots candidate, maybe even perhaps, everybody's going to pick the second person that they pick on their ranked choice is going to be the name that's most familiar to them. The first name will be the name that they most align with. The second name will be the one that's most familiar. And so they will all pick, whatever establishment, maybe incumbent in that district. And they'll say, well, I really want this guy to win, but if I have to back it up, I'll take this guy. It's just a shit show. Not only that, it's almost impossible to audit because there's so much math involved in it. And there's so much, like, you're adding a whole nother vote. You're adding 2 votes and sometimes 3 votes. And so when you go to do audits on stuff like that, you've now added another layer of complexity. And that is, complexity breeds corruption. And it's just, do not let this happen, guys. We cannot allow this to happen. They are actually introducing this as legislation in Congress to establish the use of ranked choice voting in elections for the offices of Senate and Representative in Congress and for other purposes. They still have not published the text of this bill. Let me see. I had this up for like a week. They still don't have the text published for the bill. So we can't even read the bill yet, but they're out there propagandizing people that ranked choice voting is going to usher in a golden age of voting because of campaigns and elections, because we're going to be nice to each other again. There's no incentive now for Democrats to fight against each other. So we're all just going to kumbaya and gather our Democratic circle wagons and circle those wagons against the Republicans, the mean, ugly Republicans, and whoever has the most money, whoever is the establishment's choice, you're most likely going to win. don't buy into it. Don't buy into it. I did think it was funny that they're, taking control of the elections after we just read this briefing from Elias Law Group saying it should come as no surprise that DOJ fails to identify any federal law supporting its demand for the Fulton County ballot materials. The U.S. Constitution, quote, invests the states with responsibility for the mechanics of elections, subject to any decision by Congress to preempt state legislative choices. So Elias was arguing earlier this week that the states have all the authority for the mechanics of their elections, and ranked choice voting would be the mechanics of an election. But then you have Jamie Raskin coming out like literally 4 days later and being like, let's bring in ranked choice voting. We need ranked choice voting. But the states have the authority. Well, the states, not in this case, they don't. Not in this case, they don't. Love it. Let's, oh man, there's just so much to cover today. There's just so much to cover today. Oh, man. How can I breeze through some of these stories? These are some big stories. All right. We'll skip over this one. So Rubio came out earlier this week, later in the week, and said that I'll just read Rubio's post. I won't go through all of it. Far too long, ideologues in Europe have led organized efforts to coerce American platforms to punish American viewpoints that they oppose. The Trump administration will no longer tolerate these egregious acts of extraterritorial censorship. Today, the State Department will take steps to bar leading figures of the global censor industrial complex from entering the United States. We stand ready and willing to expand this list if others do not reverse course. Rubio, Marco. I've been very positive on you the last month or so. I've been very skeptical generally since Trump was elected. I admit that. But I've been very pleased with Marco Rubio over the last 3 or 4 months. Let's continue that, please. And while you're calling out the Brits for trying to censor us extraterritorially, let's also call out Israel for trying to propagandize us extraterritorially. Israel has a new $6 million plan to flood Gen Z platforms with pro-Israel content. The government of Israel hired a new conservative-aligned firm called Clock Tower X LLC to create media for Gen Z audiences in a contract worth $6 million. At least 80% of content that Clock Tower produces will be, quote, tailored to Gen Z audiences across platforms, including TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, and other relevant digital and broadcast outlets with a minimum goal of 50 million impressions per month. Clock Tower will even deploy, this is the scariest part right here, guys. Clock Tower will even deploy, quote, websites and content to deliver GPT framing results on GPT conversations, end quote. In other words, Clock Tower will create new websites to influence how AI GPT models such as ChatGPT, how they are trained on vast amounts of data from every corner of the internet, frame topics and respond to them. Basically, they're going to spend money to make websites that are going to train GPT to give pro-Israel remarks. Now, again, you say Israel, anti-Semite. I would do this for any country, any foreign country that is going to try to come over here, propagandize our youth, and tell them on TikTok, social media, X, YouTube, whatever platform, and train AI models to propagandize children and teenagers and young, 20-somethings in this country, and spending millions of dollars to do that is foreign influence in our country, period. Doesn't matter what country it is. It's just Israel is brazen enough to say it out loud. Clock Tower will integrate its pro-Israel messaging into Salem Media Network Properties, a conservative Christian media group that boasts a vast radio network and produces high-profile shows such as Hugh Hewitt Show, The Larry Elder Show, and The Right View with Laura Trump. Donald Trump Jr. and Laura Trump are significant stakeholders in that company. Former Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale is the advisor who hired the controversial micro-targeting firm Cambridge Analytica in 2016. Trump's campaign for 2016. He is at the center of the Israeli government's New Deal. Clock Tower is led by Parscale, who is also the new chief strategy officer for the Salem Media Group. So again, this is not good. On one hand, you've got Rubio out there saying we need to stop British censorship in America. Agree, 100%. Great Britain should have no influence over America's social media, over our news, over our culture, over our, whatever is being put out there for us to consume. Britain should have no influence over that. They do. MI5, MI6, they're all over it. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, Israel here. But by that same token, Israel should not be spending $6 million to take over conservative outlets and propagandize Gen Z. It's like Charlie Kirk dies. Turning Point USA is kind of in a quasi who knows where it's going state. So what does Israel do? They completely pivot, spend $6 million on Salem Now to try and get out that propaganda. That's not anything new. That's not anything shocking.
But Jewish schools are not enough. The entire education system in this country, from K through 12 and colleges, must be reformed. Laws must be passed that will focus on three things: no racism, no anti-Semitism, and no anti-Western civilization should be taught here.
Oh, so the World Jewish Congress gets to dictate now what our students here in America get to learn, apparently. I don't know if you guys saw Steve Bannon at Turning Point USA. This is why, in my opinion, this is why the Israeli government is going after Gen Z here in the United States, because Turning Point USA is no longer a viable option, or at least they're a volatile option. They don't know which way Turning Point USA is going to go, so they're hedging their bets. They're funding another apparatus just in case they need it, and this is why.
Shapiro called Breitbart Trump Pravda. When he left, he called it Trump Pravda, and he was kind of right. We had to be. There was no other news site that was supporting President Trump. When poor Megyn Kelly came out in that first debate and made what looks like now some innocuous questions, right, about Trump's Facebook page or his Twitter feed, about Rosie O'Donnell and others, have Jack Posobiec ask her how it turned out. We unleashed the dogs. We were maniacs. Why? President Trump had no backing at Fox, had no backing at the National Review, and at 16, that would have driven him out of the race. So we had to be there. But Ben Shapiro is like a cancer, and that cancer spreads. It's a cancer, and it metastasizes. He tried to take over Breitbart, and I ran him out of there. He tried to take over David Horowitz's, who was his mentor. Don't ask me. Ask the guys associated with David Horowitz what he did there. He tried to take that over. And mark my word, he will make a move on Turning Point, because he's always been envious of Charlie Kirk.
He already did.
This is not about speech. It's not about deplatforming. This is about power politics. And what Charlie Kirk believed in, to the core of his being, that America makes decisions for America and Americans make decisions for America. That was Charlie.
And that is why you're seeing the pivot, and they go on in that Turning Point USA, the AmFest from last weekend. They go on different, kind of segues. You got Megyn Kelly out there saying, I am pro-Israel, but at the same time, I am not. It was kind of strange. Tucker, of course, saying, I support the Israeli people, the Israeli government, not so much. Bannon's a little more. Bannon's a cannon, right? Bannon's the honey badger. He don't give a shit. And Bannon, I agree with the most on all of that. So I do. As far as the Ben Shapiro wants Turning Point USA, I mean, I think it was either the day after, maybe even the day of, but I know the day after, at least, that he died, Shapiro came out and said, we will pick up that bloody microphone that Charlie Kirk dropped, and we will carry on Charlie Kirk's legacy. He's already made his bid at Turning Point USA. He wants it. He wants it so bad. It is the most influential, maybe political organization in the world. Well, in the United States, AIPAC is up there too. But in terms of Turning Point USA has the youth army behind them. Tremendous amount of influence. I know a lot of us don't want to hear it and don't want to say it, but I have younger siblings that are in college. I have nieces and nephews that are in high school and college. And Turning Point USA is ridiculously influential with their generation. And so seeing Bannon out there like that and being a savage like that and being, some of the things we love about Trump, just no filter, big deal right there. Big deal. Okay, so man, I'm getting crushed here. I'm getting crushed on time. I know I saw somebody in the chat mention it. I have to do so Rumble does this creator program. And it's kind of like YouTube when you get monetized on YouTube, but Rumble YouTube monetizes you right off the bat. But they have a creator program, and if you do X amount of hours, you make more money, you get paid more, you get better advertisements, you get more perks, right? But you have to do like 30 hours a month. And so I finally made it, because I don't do much on my own platform. I mainly do Badlands. And so I finally got in, and I was waiting all of this month until like 4 days ago for them to approve me, and I wasn't doing content. First off, I was sick most of that time, but I wasn't doing content. And so now I think I've got like 13 hours, and I've got 17 hours to go by the 31st. And so I'm trying to hustle as best I can to get as much as I can done. And that's why I've been doing a lot of these restreams. Plus, not to mention, I mean, I would never do anything just for that reason. But there's also the elections front and center right now. And so I'm also trying to get out some old stories that, people will see, and they'll, realize what's been going on and the work that we've been doing. And hopefully some new faces will see that. And it's a good thing. So let's so what I'm thinking about doing here is, because I'm going to do a long segment on the election. I'll cover broadly some of the news here, but there's something that came out last night, and we got to address it. And that's the thing that's going to hurt some feelings. So to be honest with you guys, I'm probably going to do the election stuff here, and then I'll set up a whole another show for that. And I'm so sorry to all you guys that maybe stuck it all the way to the end for this. I just made this decision right now because I didn't realize I was going to go 2 hours on the general news before I got into my specialty. Come on, CanCon, you can do it. I know I can do it, but it's important, and I don't want to stuff it in the back of a 3-hour-long show where most people aren't going to see it. The average watch time on my videos is 15 to 20 minutes, which means that there's a lot of people that go the whole way, but there's a lot of people that go a minute or 2 minutes. And so I don't want people to miss it. I want to start out, if I'm going to do this, I want to start out just swinging right off the rip. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll cover some of the general election news that's been going on, and don't worry, it'll be good stuff. I'll make sure it's good stuff. All right. So I do want to talk about this because this is also important. So the Venezuela thing is interesting, and this is going to segue perfectly into Ukraine. We talked about, Trump going after these ships. I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest with you. I don't think that we should be seizing sanctioned ships. I honestly don't think we should have the authority to sanction ships if they're transporting legitimate goods. Maybe they're not transporting legitimate goods. There could be some intelligence that we're not privy to. But if we're being told that these are just oil tankers carrying crude oil to Iran, to Russia, to wherever it's going, that should not be illegal. I'm sorry. I don't think that should be sanctioned. I don't think that we should be able to. It could be sanctioned from going to the U.S. Maybe you could even make the argument for like NATO countries. But who gave us the authority to say, hey, Venezuela, you can't sell anything to Russia? Where do we come off saying that? So I'm a little bit, skeptical. I understand there's a lot of intelligence about this that I'm not privy to. So, that's why I'm not like avidly outspoken against it. But we went after another tanker earlier this week. We seized that one, and then we were tracking this third one. I believe this one got away. Now, all of these have been flying false flags, fake flags. I love it that they call them fake false flags. But they're not flying the flags that they're supposed to fly, and that will kind of lead to this story here, which will get us rolling into the next segment. So this is from the Telegraph. Putin vows revenge on Ukraine after oil tanker blown up in the Mediterranean. So you can imagine, if I'm not really that much of a fan of sanctioning ships and seizing sanctioned ships, I'm definitely not a fan of blowing them up. Definitely not a fan of blowing them up. Especially considering that there is no international law that authorizes you to blow up a ship if it's sanctioned. Now, there are extenuating circumstances, carrying weapons, if it attacks you, those kinds of things, sure. But we haven't heard any of that of this. This just happens to be Zelensky going after the quote-unquote shadow fleet. You got to say that in a whisper because it sounds more innocuous. Shadow fleet. Like that. Shadow fleet. We're going after Russia's shadow fleet. It's a fleet of shadow ships that nobody knows about. Yeah, not so much. The Shadow Fleet vessels, thought to number more than 1,000, seek to hide their participation in Russia's war machine by obscuring their ownership and flying the flags of other nations. Speaking at an annual year-end press conference in Moscow, Putin vowed to retaliate, saying, quote, another of our tankers. Wait, I thought this was a Shadow Fleet. Our tankers in the Mediterranean has been attacked, the president said, but he claimed it would not have the desired effect of disrupting supplies, adding, quote, in the end, it will only create an additional threat. A response from our country will follow. So Zelensky is out there saying, hey, I've now got the European Union, Frederick Merz, Keir Starmer in Britain. He's not in the EU anymore, but NATO. Emmanuel Macron. I don't know. I don't even know what other EU leaders are backing this. I'm sure von der Leyen is. I'm sure Rutte is. But they're empowering this little midget. I don't know what else to call him. This little retard. Zelensky is, the little assless chaps guy, dancing showman, whatever you want to call him. I don't know. I can't stand Zelensky. They've empowered him. They've empowered him so much so that he feels he can use drones to strike Russian oil tankers. I said yesterday with Chris Paul, I said that if Russia wanted to crush Ukraine, they could almost instantly. They could level Ukraine. They could run through Ukraine like they were nothing. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to push back the East Donbass while doing as little damage as possible, although they're doing a lot of damage, both sides, allegedly, reportedly, I should say. And I made the comparison yesterday that Ukraine, Putin to Zelensky is like a cat with a mouse, right? The cat has the mouse and it'll paw it around and it'll let the mouse run and then it'll pounce on it and then it'll pick it up by its tail and dangle it and smack it and drop it down again, and then it'll bring it up to the doorstep and drop it there for its owner to see how proud it is, and then eventually it takes it away and eats it, kills it and eats it. I just want to see, look, Russia, just do the kill and eating thing. They don't want it. Like, I apologize for NATO. I apologize for the EU. They just keep making this guy think that there's hope. And because of that, he thinks he has leverage in these negotiations. And because of that, he turns around and he acts like the big dog on the block. And he's really just a little shrimp. He's just a little shrimp. And, I'm really sorry that this is the way this is going. If you know the story of Ukraine, you know that this is not a war of Russian aggression. This is Ukraine that has been bombing ethnic Russians in the East Donbass since 2015 after a CIA-led coup in Kyiv that overthrew a president illegitimately, unconstitutionally, overthrew a governor, And now it's been just completely and totally infiltrated by, the Victoria Nuland crew, the Saakashvilis in Odessa, the Yatsenyuks, the Yanukovych. Yanukovych was the Poroshenkos. Yanukovych was the one that was unconstitutionally overthrown. They did not have the votes in their parliament to impeach and remove him, but they tried to assassinate him at the presidential palace. Unfortunately, he knew it was coming and fled to Russia, and they vacated the seat. And that was all the Maidan, which was led by USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, Radio Free Europe, propagandizing the people down there. And they get this big group of college students essentially protesting down there. They sit down in the Maidan for months on end. They're not doing anything. So the CIA pokes them with a stick and opens fire from the building on the crowd. And then all hell breaks loose and the pandemonium ensues. And you have the color revolution in full swing. And it replaces Yanukovych with Poroshenko. Poroshenko eventually does not do what they need him to do. So Zelensky comes in. And all of this could have been avoided if the EU would not have incentivized Ukraine to join the European Union, which would have completely blocked free trade, completely opened the floodgates for free trade from the EU through Ukraine into Russia, subverting sanctions, subverting tariffs, and all that stuff. So the whole thing is an absolute shit show. We are not being told the truth about it. I say this all the time. If you want the truth about it, or at least the other side, and again, I'm open enough to acknowledge that I could be misled on some of these things. But Oliver Stone, Ukraine on Fire, it's free on Rumble. I think it's like an hour and a half long, and it's absolutely fascinating. And you'll see just how much influence the United States has had on the color revolutions that have taken places in places like Ukraine and Georgia and other states in Eastern Europe. So again, getting back to what I was originally saying, the EU is now making Zelensky think he's got more power than he actually does. Reuters put this out, on Christmas Eve, Ukraine unveils 20-point peace proposal under discussion with U.S. It's ultimately the same thing as the 28-point plan. They took out some important parts, and they added some interesting things. Ukraine will receive robust security guarantees, and among those security guarantees, the United States, NATO, and the European countries will provide Ukraine with security guarantees that mirror Article 5, the Mutual Defense Clause of NATO's founding treaty. So on one hand, Ukraine's like, yeah, we'll agree not to join NATO. But on the other hand, we want all the benefits of NATO, that if you attack us, all NATO countries are at war with you. Fuck no. Absolutely fuck no. Article 5 in and of itself, and me and Chris talked about this yesterday, is wildly unconstitutional in the United States. Only Congress, under Article 1, Section 8, has the authority to declare war. They have the authority to enter treaties, but you cannot make a treaty that subverts the Constitution. The declaration of war, there is no, in Article 1, Section 8, there is no stipulation that says Congress can declare war unless they entered into a treaty that automatically declares war. That is not the case. That is not the case. And in fact, on the flip side of that, I would like the Defense Power, the War Powers Act to give that power back to Congress and to make them actually declare war if we have these situations. Okay, no more of this, going all the way back to Vietnam, Korea. No more of this. The president just unilaterally has the authority to deploy troops and start a war. Take that power back, Congress, which hasn't declared war since World War II. But this idea here that we can all of a sudden be like, oh, yeah, Article 5. Yeah, Article 5. We'll give Ukraine Article 5-like protections. If Russia attacks Ukraine, the United States is therefore, with NATO, at war with Russia. Fuck all the way off. Fatu. That's what we call it. FATWO. Fuck all the way off. That is absolutely insane. And that it should be an absolute deal breaker. No way, no how do they get any security guarantees that are anywhere near Article 5. Russia will formalize a policy of non-aggression towards Europe and Ukraine, and all necessary laws and all required documents on ratification, including ratification by an overwhelming majority vote in the State Duma. I can remember just 2 weeks ago when it was the European Union that was saying Russia attacking Ukraine is like an attack on the European Union, and we will treat it as such. Russia has not shown any aggression to Europe. I mean, I guess technically you could say Ukraine is a part of Europe, to the European Union. Russia is not showing aggression towards NATO or the European Union. Russia is dealing with its border country that has been infiltrated by the US, by the EU, and by NATO, by Five Eyes, is full of Mossad, is full of CIA, is full of MI6, and has been using Ukraine as a kind of like a central hub to spy on Russia by being right on their border, a corrupt country. I mean, this is just insane. Insane. The gaslight that they're putting on the American people, the lies, the propaganda that they're feeding us to make it seem like we need to back Ukraine because Ukraine is on the right here. They're not. And to be fair, it's not Ukraine's fault. Ukraine is being manipulated by the EU, NATO, and, the warmongers, globalists. They are being manipulated into thinking, first and foremost, that they have a chance in this war, but second, into somehow, if all of this ends, Ukraine is going to come out as a member of the EU, a member of NATO, or at least have the Article 5 protections of NATO. It's not going to happen. You're on Russia's border. Your ally should be Russia. I would be pretty pissed if Russia came over and started an alliance with Mexico or with Canada. I'd be pretty pissed about that, especially if they were using the FSB to spy on Americans through Canada or Mexico, which they probably are. They probably are. Ukraine will become an EU member at specifically defined at a specifically defined date. Ukraine will also receive short-term preferential access to the European market. Okay. Several funds will be established to address economic recovery, reconstruction, humanitarian issues. The objective will be to mobilize $800 billion to help Ukraine fully realize its potential. $800 billion. Where's that money going to come from? Are we giving it to them? What's the ROI we're getting on it? If we give Ukraine $800 billion, what is our ROI? Because I want more than $800 billion in return. If I'm giving you $800 billion, you better be paying me $1.3 trillion over the next 20 years, like a mortgage, like whatever. This shit's got to stop, man. And this is all this 20-point proposal that Ukraine put out. Hey, we're getting our asses kicked. Here's our proposal on ending the war. No. You accept the Russian proposal or the American proposal, the one Trump put out there. Where's that money coming from? $800 billion to rebuild Ukraine. And what's our ROI on that money? What's our return on it? And what's our guarantees on it? Because what if Russia just decides in 10 years, nah, screw this. They're sending more of their U.S. biolabs, sending more of their pathogens into our country. Screw this. Ukraine will accelerate the process of concluding a free trade agreement with the U.S. Zelensky said the U.S. position was that if Washington were to grant free trade access to Ukraine, it aimed to offer similar terms to Russia. That one I'm actually not opposed to. If Washington were to grant free trade to Ukraine, it aimed to offer the same to Russia. I'm not actually opposed to that. I think we should have free trade with Ukraine. I think we should have free trade with Russia. And that is kind of, I think Trump very much agrees with that. Then they talk about the Zaporizhzhia power plant, nuclear power plant. The U.S. proposed that it should be run by Ukraine, U.S., and Russia. Kyiv instead countered and said it should be 50-50, U.S. and Ukraine. Ukraine gets half of the energy, and the U.S. can decide what it wants to do with the other half. I'm not even for the first proposal. I don't think U.S. should have any involvement, any ownership in that power plant. We can act as a buffer. We can act as kind of a mediator in any issues that may arise. But the Kyiv proposal that it's just the U.S. and Ukraine and we can do with what we want with 50% of that, no, thank you. Why does the United States need to be running a nuclear power plant 8,000 miles away in a foreign country on one of our quote unquote adversaries' border? No, thank you. No, thank you. If we are going to go back to the Sovereign Alliance, if we are going to go back to the Monroe Doctrine and, regions of influence, then this is not the way to go about it. And so that one right there is completely counterintuitive to the national security strategy that President Trump just put out. Ukraine and Russia commit to implementing educational programs in schools and across society that promote understanding. This is the DEI one. Eliminate racism and prejudice. Ukraine will implement the European Union rules on religious tolerance and the protection of minority languages. Let's go back to censorship of the European Union. Yes, please, where you can be arrested if you are a autistic child who calls a cop a lesbian. You can be arrested for that. Yes, let's please go back to the European Union. Now, I realize that was in Britain, but they have similar laws throughout the EU. No thanks. This thing's an absolute shit show. And the last one is well, not the last one. The last one I'm going to read here is my favorite of all, because it should be number one, and it should be before any proposal is even introduced. This should be the stipulation to get to the negotiations. Ukraine must hold elections as soon as possible after the signing of this agreement. No. Ukraine should hold elections as soon as possible. Zelensky is over a year past his last election. He is going to be voted out in Ukraine. He is wildly unpopular. From what we're told, he is wildly unpopular with the Ukrainians. They want this war to end. And he is perpetuating this war because he's being bolstered by the retards in Europe. Election now. And then let's get the Ukrainians representation to negotiate this deal, rather than the guy the Ukrainians despise, who is probably going to face corruption charges. And many people in his cabinet and below him, his subordinates, are already facing these corruption charges. Let's get him out, and let's figure out where the EU currently lives. And where am I getting all of this? The EU is the one subverting all this. How about from DNI Tulsi Gabbard?
Into a direct conflict with Russia. But what I've seen over these months is that every time they make progress and they move closer and closer to that hope for peace, the warmongers in the deep state step up and try to do everything they can to stop them.
Yep.
Predictably, they use the same old tactics that they've always used. The deep state within the intelligence community weaponizes intelligence to try to undermine progress. They leak it to their friends in the mainstream propaganda media to try to spread this and push a false narrative. They foment fear and hysteria as a way to justify the continuing of the war and their efforts to undermine President Trump's efforts towards peace, and do so specifically in this case in order to try to pull the US military into a direct conflict with Russia, which is ultimately what the EU and NATO want. We cannot allow this to happen. We have to see clearly what's happening before our very eyes and stand united in this cause of peace.
Yes. I agree with that 1000%. I mean, she nails it right there. Here's the thing, though. Tulsi, you're the ODNI. You are the Director of National Intelligence. You have the authority to, or the power to start to cut this hydra, to cut the head off and get to the root of all this. Case in point, look at this warmonger. Look at this warmonger right here with his double chin and his fat face, his fish face, lips all gone down. The guy that was laughing about killing Palestinians a couple months ago. Check this out.
If Putin says no, we need to dramatically change the game, including giving Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine to hit the drone and missile factories that exist in Russia. I would go all in if Putin says no. If Putin says no.
If Putin says no to this peace proposal, which is an absolute crock of shit, if Putin says no to this, all in. All in. Yeah, right. God, I hate these warmongers. You cannot hate these war pigs enough. I saw some. Annie, get your gun, just said war pig. An ephemeral experience. I just saw that briefly out of the corner of my eyes. I was going to say warmongers, and I pivoted to war pig. I like the war pig better. A little Aussie up in here this morning. Let's get some Aussie rolling. All right. So change of plan. I am going to do the election part. For those of you that made it all the way to the end with me, I promised you guys this in the beginning. So we're going to do the whole show, one go right here. Before we get into that, though, I do want to talk about another sponsor, and that is our friends over at 1775 Coffee. Have you tried 1775 Coffee yet? Now is your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped with only 1,000 units available. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard, the smooth medium roast, and the Vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus with no crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free, and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with a plastic spoon, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your father-in-law's political opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler, $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for just 99 bucks. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler alert, it is. Just go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. All right. I think that's our last sponsor for the day. I do also have, guys, I have sponsors listed down below. I've got Mushroom Vibe. I've got mypillow.com, promo code CanCon, and I've got a new gold silver sponsor that I'm going to be having next week, starting with next week. And I tell you what, guys, man, I am so effing excited about silver. What's it at now? Has it passed 80 yet? 79.59. 79.59. It has been absolutely rocking. It has not broke that $50 line yet, but it is right there, and I'm so excited for it. All right, new cases. Thanks for doing content for us this week, CanCon. I'm sure it wasn't easy juggling this too. No, this is a crazy week. You got a holiday, right? 2-day holiday right in the middle of the week, and we worked through the one of those days. Christmas, I'm not doing anything on Christmas. I'm sorry, guys, not doing anything on Christmas. All right, so the first big we've already talked about on this show. We've already talked about the 315,000 ballots. That was last week, so we got that over last week's week in review, and now like the floodgates are wide open. The floodgates are full blown open. They're pouring out all this election stuff, and I'm seeing so many things over and over and over again, things that I've been talking about for 4 and 5 years, back when my beard wasn't gray, when it was all black. I'm going to start dyeing my beard since the election stuff's coming around. I'm going to dye my beard black again so that I look younger, right? Let's get that younger look. No, but all this stuff is coming back out, and it's like, man, I wish there was the same interest in this back then, but it had to be this way, right? I can get behind that. Uh-oh. Stand by 1 second. Oh, never mind. So anyways, there's a lot of information coming out right now. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. We did see our dear friend here at my show. He got an honorable mention from President Trump, and I can't find it right now, but of course I'm talking about the one and only Clay Parikh. And where is that clip? We'll play that clip. Here it is. And I'm pretty sure that this clip here, so let's pull it up. So this was put out by the Skiff, but I would bet money that this is a screen grab from me. I don't know anybody else that even knew about this hearing, nonetheless covered it the way I did. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this was cropped down to zoom in on Clay to take my logo out of the top right-hand corner here. But let's play this clip.
Remembering correctly, there were several states involved.
And which time period are you referring to?
This was 2020.
Before or after the election?
During the election.
In your examination of any of these Dominion systems, have you seen any indication of non-election personnel remotely accessing a Dominion system?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I too have reviewed a series of emails produced by Dominion in which they're discussing remoting into Gwinnett County, Georgia.
You also mentioned Dominion remotely connecting to election systems, but you don't have any evidence that occurred in Georgia, correct?
There was one county. I've seen a lot of Dominion emails. I've had to translate Dominion emails from Serbian to English to verify the technical questions I was being asked about them, to verify that it was translated properly. So
So it's your testimony that there is evidence of Dominion remotely accessing Georgia election equipment?
Yes, on the one county. It was included with stuff that I was researching and reading through, considering Colorado. Michigan was also involved, and there were other ones.
To your understanding, is Dominion able to remotely connect to these election systems?
Yes,
Are they able to do that without detection?
yes,
And are you aware of any instances in which that has occurred?
yes.
Can you identify those instances?
One would be the Denver, Colorado server was granted or requested to grant Belgrade, only Belgrade. I did search. There is a Belgrade, Montana. Again, why would Montana need to connect into a Colorado file transfer server as part of the election system? And there are other components and things that were done in the background concerning the database and the configure of the database server that still do not have an engineering change order, because if somebody works in an operational environments for a lot of different things, what I will tell you is sometimes things break or you have a problem and you have to fix it. And you submit a change request, or in this case, an engineering change order that's retroactive, right? You want to go back and make sure that you record the process so that you have change management and integrity of the system. If you do not record changes, you lead yourself down a very bad road.
Okay, so this one actually has the extra, so we'll play the extra too.
I estimated that somewhere between 80 and 90% were going to Joe Biden. Throughout the day, it kept making me sicker and sicker every time I saw another Biden, Biden, Biden. And then I'm going through batches. 100% of the batches were Biden. I find that statistically impossible.
Okay, so first I want to go back and I want to see just real quick, because they show a tweet right here when they
Not
zoom
record
out.
changes.
We can stop there, but when this ends right there, you can't see it as good on this one. I think that this was, again, I think that this clip was my clip, and somebody scraped it and didn't credit me with it, and that kind of sucks. That actually really sucks. Let me see if I can just do a quick Twitter search. Let's see, election system in Georgia, Michigan, and other were remotely. I don't know if this is the way that I would do that search, but I'm not seeing it here. I'd have to go find where I posted all of those videos. I posted so many of those clips from that. Yeah, I'm not going to find it now. All right, so I don't want to kill you guys' time with that. That was the post from Clay Parikh that President Trump reposted, and there's been a lot of stuff that has come out since then with all of this. And one of the things I want to jump into is this clip right here, because this clip is going pretty viral, and I'm going to clear the air on it.
Dropping major election fraud information. Yeah. And Mike Lindell heard, I heard it too. What have you heard? I heard like early mid-January, I broke a month before he said it, they're about to release some big stuff.
Yeah, I shouldn't comment on timing, but I'm confident that Trump gets the joke. Trump is no longer, he's the man we've always wanted him to be. He's taking action. He finally has got lost. He's been exasperated with what's happened, and he's becoming the Trump of the television show. And you know what? It's goddamn welcome in my mind.
Well, we have these clips coming up at the end of the show next hour where he's now releasing the depositions with the election fraud experts proving it all. Yeah. Remote access, fraud, all of it.
He's now releasing those. Dude, I've had those published for years. That hearing is 2 years old.
See, those are guys I've been working with for 5 years.
Oh, have you?
Clay Farik.
Clay Farik. Is that the fake Clay Farik? Clay Farik? That's the fake Clay Farik.
He's a 27-year Air Force veteran.
How dare you? Clay Farik, the 27-year Air Force veteran. That son of a bitch. He is a stolen valor son of a bitch that has stolen the title of a United States Marine and lied to me this whole time. He was a 27-year Air Force veteran and not a 22-year Marine Corps veteran, combat veteran in multiple theaters, drill instructor. Yeah, he wasn't any of that stuff. I'm sorry. You can't possibly confuse an Air Force veteran with a Marine veteran. Major difference. Major. You could confuse maybe Army Marines. I could see that one. Army Marines. I could see that. Army Air Force. I could see that. Air Force Marines. No, those are like the two total polar opposites of the military spectrum. I see Marine in the Woods in the chat. He'll verify. You can never confuse a Marine. It gets worse, guys. It gets worse. So
doing penetration testing, 7 of them at the EAC. So
he was never at the EAC. Clay Farik was with Pro V&V as a contractor. And again, he hasn't been working with him for 5 years. We'll just put it that way. I'll just leave it at that. I happen to know the guy kind of well. And when I saw this last night, immediately sent it to him and was like, bro, what the fuck is going on here? Now all of a sudden the CIA spook is your buddy and he's been working with you for 5 years?
he knows this stuff inside and out. He did it, and another former Green Beret, Ben Cotton. I mean, they've had an NSA guys like Jim Penrose. We've had the best.
Jim Penrose. Another guy that I know some things about that he did some things that were very detrimental to the cases in Michigan. We'll just leave that at that.
Guys in the country and the government has,
and they were extracurricular things. It wasn't like he sabotaged the case itself. He did some extracurricular things in Michigan.
So he knows this stuff inside and out. He did it, and another former Green Beret, Ben Cotton. I mean, they've had an NSA guys like Jim Penrose. We've had the best guys in the country, and the government has now had its own people come in to even take the work much further. Well, they have this completely decoded. It's just shocking what you're going to see in the video.
That's what Trump said a week ago. He said, we have truckloads, we have the whole proof, we're releasing it soon.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to talk elections, well, that's one of the 3 stories I'm here to talk about with you today. If you want, we could just play that election clip I just sent.
No, well, let's start at the beginning because you brought this in. Here's a clip. What's the clip of?
The clip is something that higher pay grades than mine would like the world to see, to focus on something that's being revealed in Georgia. It's just 3 minutes, but
here it is.
Very intense.
Okay, so let's pause it right there because I want to unpack what's being said so far. First and foremost, Patrick Byrne is a self-professed CIA spook, an elite CIA spook. You know, he said that he was a very high spook. He claims to have been working with Clay Farik, a 27-year Air Force veteran. He's misrepresenting that. It is not, I mean, maybe he funded them indirectly somehow, perhaps. Maybe, you know, that would be like me saying that, I'm trying to think. That would be like me going and watching over someone's shoulder one time and then being like, oh yeah, I helped that person the whole time for 5 years. It's not true. I think there'll be more coming out on this. It's concerning to me. And here's the reason why this is important. You might be saying, CanCon, why are you doing this? Because this guy is CIA. He's admitted to being CIA. He's also admitted that he's never going to work with the CIA. In 2023, in his Capital Time magazine article, he said, I am not a spy. I do not want to work with the CIA. or I would not work with. Let me hold on. You know what? Let me just pull this up. Let me just pull this up. Ba 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 ba. Hold on. I got to bring the receipts. Come on. Did I download it? All right, I can't find it, but he oh wait, I took a screenshot of it. Duh. I can just upload the video. I can show you my screen. I forgot I took a screenshot of it. Stop that screen share. Share screen window, this window. Here it is. This is from his own article, his own long expose in Capital Times in June of 2023. What is or was the nature of your connection to the United States government? I am not a spy. I have never worked with the CIA, but it has been one of the honors of my life that from time to time, on rare occasion, there have been other parts of the government who knew they could call on me to make a small contribution, generally a rather academic contribution, to some effort of theirs, often having to do with peace. So right there, I've never worked with the CIA. Then he comes out 5 days after he completely and totally just blackballs me and Ash on a show when he was confirmed 5 minutes before that he was going to be on the show. 5 days after that, he comes out and he's like, oh, yeah, you know what? I actually am CIA. And from there, it starts turning into the whole op that Venezuela bad, globalist good, Delcy Rodriguez bad, Maria Corina Machado bad, or good, excuse me, when it's the other way around. So Ash and I are covering. Oh, did something happen? Am I still live? Oh, oh, I'm on a different window. I'm sorry. Okay, yes, I'm still good. So you go from I'll never work with the CIA to I am CIA. Then you start saying that Venezuela's stealing elections. I've told you over and over again that Venezuela was taken over by SGO Corp in 2012, moved to London. It was never, ever, ever, ever. Smartmatic was never, ever, ever based in Venezuela. It was incorporated in Delaware, based in Florida. It did run elections in Venezuela in 2004. You know, a lot of that stuff is actually correct. But from 2012 on, it had a bunch of globalists running it, not Venezuelans. I mean, granted, the Venezuelans were still on the board. The Venezuelans still had majority shares in Smartmatic, but SGO Corp pulled the strings. SGO Corp was the top dog, the parent company, whose only holdings were Smartmatic. And so that's, you know, kind of how you shield yourself. If Smartmatic goes down, you shield yourself from anything that could happen to you. Lord Malik Brown, president of Open Societies, was the chairman of SGO Corp. He's still on the board, but he was the chairman at the time of the 2020 election. Sir Nigel Knowles, another British oligarch. David Giampaolo, an American who is a hedge investor for British oligarchs. The SGO Corp is based in London. Smartmatic is based in London. And so, you know, I get concerned when I see a CIA spook who's lied about being a CIA spook, who will go on Alex Jones every day, will go on Emerald Robinson every day, will go on all these podcasts, gets called out for not going on ours and says, have them DM me. I follow them both. And so we do. Very publicly says he will come on our show, confirms 4 times with us that he's going to come on our show. One of those times being 5 minutes before our show starts, when his secretary asked us to send her a link, which he already had, and then cancels as the intro to the show is running, and Harrison Floyd comes in and clutch and saves the day and comes on the show, and it was a much better show anyways. I've got problems. One of the other big concerns I have is that Patrick Byrne says he's been funding all of this. He says two things that are concerning. He says he's been funding all of this, but he also says he's been doing it on behalf of the government. But then he says it's out of his own pocket. You don't work for the government and fund things out of your own pocket. It just doesn't happen that way. And I realize this is going to piss a lot of people off. And I've probably got people that are listening right now that are going to blackball me for this. And I don't give a fuck anymore. I really don't. I really don't give a fuck. This misinformation that's being put out there is pushing us to go to war with Venezuela. I don't know if they have enough pull and clout to do it, but this is what it's being used to do. And it's also a distraction from the real election fraud and the real people that have been working on election fraud in the United States. And even if there was the Venezuelan influence, you still have to have sources in America. And we're not focused on them. We're not focused on the people that were running it here in America, period. Now, I have heard rumors that a lot of these election integrity organizations that have been funded by the CIA guy, that their funding dried up very quickly right after Trump cut USAID funding. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what the rumor is. But the bottom line here is, you've got a guy that's just putting out just ridiculous stories. Maybe they're true. He had a chance to come on my show, so I have no holds barred at this point. He backed out of the show. It's been 3 weeks since the show. He said he'd make it up to us. He has not made it up to us. So all holds barred now. No holds barred, I should say. All holds barred. No holds barred. So let's play the rest of this, because there is actually some good stuff in here. And again, I've said that probably 80% of what he says about all this stuff is true. It's true. But there's a lot of stuff that he says that is verifiably false. Verifiably false. And maybe it's deliberate misinformation. I don't know. But I have my concerns. And I realize there's a lot of people that are, very prominent in our movement that are associated with this. And again, I said, I'm probably going to get blackballed by a lot of people for this, but I don't care at this point. Because I witnessed firsthand the manipulation. Now, this next part is this clip they're going to play here is not in any way, shape, or form on him, on Patrick Byrne. This is not. And I'm going to explain to you what I uncovered on this years ago. All right. So we're going to talk about DeKalb County and Michelle Long Spears here for a second.
Now, dozens of people are hand counting ballots in the race for DeKalb County Commission District 2 after a candidate discovered a problem in the electronic tally.
May 24th, DeKalb County, Georgia. Voters went to the polls to vote on a local county commissioner race in District 2 between Lauren Alexander, Marshall Orson, and Michelle Long Spears. The end result from the Dominion machine showed Lauren Alexander received 34.67% of the vote, Marshall Orson receiving 41.35% of the vote, and Michelle Long Spears receiving 23.98% of the vote. In Georgia, if one candidate doesn't get above 50% of the vote total, a runoff election is automatically held between the two top candidates, meaning Michelle Long Spears was cut out of the race. But Michelle Long Spears felt odd about the numbers, so she visited different precincts to double-check the tallies. Guess what? She noticed that in some precincts she didn't receive a single vote. But how is that possible that a candidate with 24% of the vote total finds precincts where she didn't receive a single vote? While statistically alarming, the real surprise came when she realized there was not one vote cast for her in her own precinct, the same one where she and her husband voted for herself. Spears immediately demanded a hand recount of the results and got one. On June 1st, the results were released, and the difference between the Dominion machine count and the hand count was shocking. After the hand count, Lauren Alexander gained 355 votes. Orson lost 1,298 votes, and Spears actually gained 3,620 votes, making her the new runoff candidate. And here's the best part. When you add them all up, the hand count shows 2,810 votes more than the Dominion machines reported on the 24th. This is huge. In the small county commissioner's race, with 15,500 votes total, the Dominion machine tally was short by nearly 3,000 votes. What does that say about all the other races that were conducted on these very same machines? This is proof that the machines cannot be trusted. If Spears had not sounded the alarm, no one would have ever known.
So the good news is Trump's getting ready to release major information. He already is. And folks.
All right. So we'll go through the explanation here in just a second. But, you know, the Michelle Long Spears race is nothing new to any of my audience and anybody that's been in the election integrity movement. This was a Democrat primary in DeKalb, and everything in there is correct. They gave us an explanation for it. And that is where the real concerning part comes from. And, I'm going to let this play out here, but if you actually knew the excuse given and you actually knew about, you know, the broad claims in the election integrity movement over the last 4 years, specifically DeKalb County and how it relates to Antrim County, this would make sense. But, you know, again, the real research that gets done sometimes goes unchecked or unnoticed, at least by, you know, people that have a specific agenda.
Well, this is an important video.
Yeah, it's real important. What it shows is a Democrat in 2022, a very odd event occurred that caused there to be a detailed hand recount, which they usually have ways of deflecting. And what it showed was the only thing odd about that was she discovered that there were a bunch of precincts where she didn't get a vote, and then she checked her own precinct and she didn't, but she knew she and her husband had voted for her and they didn't get a vote. So that got her to, and it turns out that she's 20% of the vote had been stolen. So that's and we have no reason not to think that's going on everywhere. It's only the only thing unique about that is that something happened that kind of triggered the correct investigation. So that's happening everywhere.
So what do you make of it coming out 300 and whatever, 70,000 votes, 200 and something thousand votes?
I think it's tip of the iceberg.
But that's exactly what Trump and you said 5 years ago was in Maricopa and you know, also in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah,
Atlanta.
I mean, it's all come out. I mean, wow.
Yeah, we had.
Biden only won about 11,000 votes there.
Can I, now that it's all over, hasn't all the indictments been dismissed and such?
No.
Yeah. So I don't want to get any trouble, but now that that's all gone, I'll tell you, there's one guy called me. His name's...
Okay. This next part, he doxes somebody that should not have been doxed. And I'm still trying to validate whether or not this is true. I know the first part of this was mostly not true, and I don't want to speak about what I don't know is true or not. So I'm not going to go and play the second half of this clip until I know that what he says is untrue, because I don't think it's true. Never heard this before. The DeKalb thing is interesting, and here's the problem. Again, you know, Patrick Byrne is saying that this is happening everywhere. There's zero evidence that this is happening everywhere. And here is what happened in DeKalb, and I'm going to show you why this is still extremely concerning. DeKalb County claims that they had a candidate drop off at the last minute, and they did not update their systems. And because of this, the votes that should have been allocated to Michelle Long Spears were allocated to the person below him, and so forth and so on. And so the votes were all kind of bumped down one notch on the ladder, so to speak. And this is strikingly similar to what they claimed in Antrim County in the 2020 election. Geez, I can't think of Rocky De La Fuente, Joe Biden. Anyways, Joe Biden had actually been ahead in Antrim County. They end up figuring out what happened, and they say the same thing, that a down ballot candidate dropped out of the race and they forgot to update the system. Same excuse that was given in DeKalb. The problem is here in Antrim, which predates DeKalb by 2 years, they took it further. Matt DePerno, Bill Bailey, Bill Bailey, rest his soul, a good friend of mine, Matt DePerno, a friend of mine. They sued. Bill Bailey sued. Matt DePerno became his attorney. They got the forensic examination. Russ Ramsland and ASOG did the analysis of the machine. They found out what happened. Well, they found out something totally different. They put out their report, and then J. Alex Halderman came in and put out a report to kind of rebuttal the ASOG report. Now, I'm going to focus on Halderman's testimony here, or his report here. So what Halderman claimed happened, and this is kind of complicated, and some of you guys may have heard this before. When you are programming the software to run an election, they have what's called, I think it's the election event software, and it makes the election software for you. You input all the candidates, you input all the precincts and counties, and it puts it out for you. Now it does it in alphabetical order. Okay, so if you have, and I always use the example, we're going to use one specific jurisdiction. If you have 5 precincts in that jurisdiction, and you have precincts A, precinct B, precinct C, D, and E, alphabetical order. When the election event software makes that ballot or the ballots, plural, for those 5 precincts, it's going to start with precinct A. It's going to start with the first race, and it's going to assign that candidate a number, the first candidate on the ballot, number 1. And then every candidate on precinct A going down is going to be assigned a number, 1 through, let's say there's 50 candidates on there. There's 50 total candidates for however many races. They're all going to be assigned a number, 50, 1 through 50. Then it's going to move on to precinct B in the same county, same jurisdiction. Precinct B, rather than starting at 1 again, is going to start at 51. And it's going to go 51 all the way down to, say, 100. Precinct C is going to start at 101 and go all the way down to 150. And this is how the machine is going to view them. It's not seeing the name Donald Trump. It's seeing number 23 or number 17 or number 4, whatever the case might be. It doesn't see the name. So it looks at the timing mark. It says, okay, this is number 1, this timing mark, ballot bubble filled in, number 1 gets the credit here. Okay, so are we tracking so far? Is everybody tracking? And it goes all the way down in alphabetical order, precinct A, all the way down to precinct E. We're only using a small example here, 5. So what Halderman says happened in Antrim County is, say, precinct B has a candidate taken off. And let's say, remember, precinct B was 50 through 100. So say number 54 drops out of the race. So what happens when 54 drops out of the race? You have to go in and reprogram precinct B so that 54 is now 53, or 55 is now 54, and 56 is now 55, and so forth. Everybody moves up 1. Everybody moves up 1. Here's the problem. If you do that, every other precinct has to be updated, because every number is going to move up 1 all the way down to precinct E. And that was the claim. And that's why in Antrim County, it wasn't just, and everybody always thinks it was Trump and Biden that flipped. It wasn't. It was all the candidates down ballot that flipped, because they went in, they had 1 candidate drop. They updated that 1 precinct, but did not update all the precincts following. And so all the precincts following the Antrim County, I think it was the, was it Lake Mary Township? Central Lake Township is where Bill Bailey voted. Central Lake Township was the only township that was updated. They didn't update all the other ones going down. And so all those votes going down from that precinct lower were flipped. Okay? And so that's why in Antrim County, you had flips for Congress, you had flips for the Senate, you had flips for the dog catcher, the marijuana proposal, which was actually how Bill Bailey was able to get that lawsuit brought. Now, that's Halderman's excuse, that they updated the 1 precinct. They did not update all the subsequent precincts, the following precincts, and they had to. So now let's fast forward to DeKalb County. In DeKalb County, they had the same thing in the Michelle Long Spears race. A candidate dropped out. And because of that, they updated, they forgot to update it, right? They forgot to update that race. And so Michelle Long Spears was off in the tally. And so her votes were actually attributed to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else and so forth and so on. Now, they said they updated the Michelle Long Spears race. They updated that precinct and found out that she actually, or updated that from that precinct down. They found out that they updated it and she won. If you updated that precinct and down, then you have to verify all of the other votes in that election. Like if Michelle Long Spears was off because they failed to do an update, every election down, every race down ballot from hers, not above hers, but down from hers, would be off as well. And to my knowledge, nobody ever looked at that. And so again, this to me, now to be fair, the 2,800 ballots that were missing, that's odd. And that could be the QR signature mismatch that was found in Williamson County, Tennessee in April of 2021 and was found all throughout Georgia by David Cross, Kevin Monclub, myself, and several others that scoured through system log files in Georgia and found this. I found Floyd County. David Cross found in like 64 out of 67 counties. Kevin found them all over the place as well. Nobody's ever given any credit or not credit, but any thought to that in Georgia and any explanation. There's just been massive discrepancies in Georgia regarding Floyd County and all the other counties. Fulton County is another one, but all the other counties that when they did the hand recount and they found thousands of ballots, that's a problem. Nobody ever looked at that. But going back to the DeKalb thing, one of the two is true. They either Haldeman's report in Antrim County is correct and they didn't do their due diligence in DeKalb County, and there's a lot of people in DeKalb County down ballot from Michelle Long Spears that are not legitimately elected, or the Haldeman report in Antrim County was wrong. They actually do have vote flipping software, and they used it in DeKalb County. One way or the other, something here is fishy. And I just thought, again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the assessment that Alex Jones and Patrick Byrne had there. Although I do think it is pretty reckless to say that is what happened in all the counties, because it's not. It's just simply not what happened in all the counties. But they are correct in that is a fatal flaw in the system that people might not know. It is sloppy programming, as Camo Punk said. That is sloppy programming to make every precinct dependent on each other or on the succeeding precincts. So precinct A, they can adjust whatever they want, and all the other precincts have to adjust. B can adjust whatever they want, and A doesn't have to do anything because A is still the same, but C, D, and E have to adjust. If C adjusts, A and B are fine because they're not affected by it. But C, D, and E have to adjust. And so in DeKalb County, if Michelle Long Spears' race is precinct B, then C, D, and E also had to update their software, and they didn't. As far as we know, they didn't. A was fine. So if Michelle Long Spears was precinct D, then D and E needed to adjust. Otherwise, they're going to be off by one position in their ballot formats. So that is what really happened in DeKalb County. That is the comparison between DeKalb County and Antrim County. And, whether or not the Haldeman report holds water. Now, again, I've talked about this numerous times. I've invited Haldeman onto my show numerous times to discuss this and clarify where I might be wrong in my logic. I've asked other people. I think I've asked Clay about this on air, I think, when we did the Haldeman report. And I've asked several others that are very familiar with all of this on air as well. So, again, I appreciate people doing work in the elections. I understand there's a lot of people that want to inject hopium and they want to think that these people are genuinely good people and they're correct, but I cannot put aside the things that are being said. I just can't do it. I can't have somebody lie to me and say that they never worked for the CIA, then come out and say they were CIA, dodge out of an interview that they agreed to do 5 times while the interest rolling, and then turn around and tell us that Maria Corina Machado is the good candidate for Venezuela because Delcy Rodriguez is the CIA spy. And, as we just covered in Ralph Pizzulo's stolen elections, Delcy Rodriguez's father was murdered and was tortured and murdered by the CIA. But somehow she's now a CIA asset and she now aligns with the CIA. I don't know. Maybe people can forgive like that and do a complete 180. But if the CIA murdered my dad, I would not be a fan of the CIA and would not work for them. But we're also supposed to not believe our own eyes when we see that Maria Corina Machado is literally funded. This is documented, funded by USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, and through Sumate, and wins the Nobel Prize. And again, I'm a little bit concerned about that. I told you earlier that USAID funding dries up and a lot of other funding in our movement dries up with it. And that's could be purely coincidental. Okay. Could absolutely be coincidental. Maybe one day somebody will speak up about this and we'll get some answers on this. But until then, it's all dark money. And I think that's all I've got. Oh, all right. I think I'm done. 2 hours and almost 3 hours in. Let's jump in the chat here and see what's going on here. How many people did I piss off? If I genuinely pissed you off, tell me I pissed you off with what I just said. I honestly don't care, but yeah, I'm done with the hopium, man. I'm done with the hopium. I'm not blackpilling because there's a ton going on right now, and I've got a lot of faith. I just I don't know. It's kind of frustrating. It's kind of frustrating to see these narratives going out there all of a sudden. And they don't need to. They don't need to. We got plenty to focus at home before we start getting into, did Venezuela do this? Did the globalists do this? There's plenty to focus on at home right now. And so let's do that first. I think let's do that first, right? There's a lot that is out there. Jan Bryant's testimony came back into light. I think somebody recently shared that, the one that said Runbeck was delivering ballots to the Met Tech Center in Maricopa County for 10 days. How many times have you guys seen that on my platform? I got the video up on my Rumble still. Here, I can show you. This video comes up, and I had this up on my Rumble. Let's see. If I go to my content and I search Jan Bryant, I'll share the screen right here. What the hell? Am I on the right thing? My content. All right, why is it not popping up here? I know it's uploaded here. That's really weird. If I do a search on it right now, this is actually kind of strange. I am missing a lot of videos. And I'm missing a lot of posts on X as well. Holy shit. Why is this video not popping up here? Here it is. All right, there it is. Okay, so I don't use her name then, I guess.
Yeah. No, all the high-speed scanning happens at Runbeck. So those ballots go to Runbeck. As far as I know, there were no observers there. I don't know. I never got called to work at Runbeck. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, with all due respect, Mr. Cook, now we've opened up a whole new can of worms.
Yeah, and again,
So
I don't know
this-
enough about it to be the witness.
No,
of this,
that's
so, yeah.
fine. Your observation is useful here. So what you're telling me, I'm going to play this back to you a second. The scanning wasn't actually done on site at a Maricopa county structure. It was done someplace else.
Where they have very high-speed scanners, yeah. And-
Well,
yeah.
right now, I really don't care what the speed is.
Yeah.
I want to know, were they Dominion scanners? Or they were?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with Dominion.
So I'm trying to understand, what was the purpose of scanning them in advance of them being tabulated on the Dominion equipment?
They were duplications, the ballots that wouldn't read through the tabulation machines. They were ballots that came in from military and overseas. But there were more ballots than that. So I don't know where the rest of them were coming from because they kept bringing trays of them in. So I don't know where they were coming from. That's a question for the county employees to explain to you where those ballots came from that whole next week. I don't know where they came from.
Mr. Cook, are you done?
Left.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cook.
Just like that.
Mr. Giuliani.
So you were there from the 3rd until the 10th.
Yes.
Okay, so 7 days later, ballots were still coming in. And were those ballots counted?
Yeah, I watched them go
Did
through.
you observe them being
I watched
counted?
them go through the tabulation machines and I watched people working on the adjudication of those.
And how many ballots
Oh, I don't know.
what was the largest number you saw in any one day?
Oh, man.
No, just a guess. How many cartons?
Okay, there was, I wasn't there, there was usually 2 or 3 shifts. So I want to say one day they thought 90,000 was a good number.
So
for a
one day
shift.
was.
For a shift, and if they were running multiple shifts.
And which day was that? One of the
Oh, I
middle days, one of the
It
end
was,
days?
it was in the middle.
All right, so we can kind of cut there, but that's something I've talked about numerous times, going all the way back to the day that testimony dropped. I watched the whole thing live. Liz Harris was on there, Bobby Piton was on there, Jan Bryant was on there. There were several others. I think Waldron, Colonel Waldron, I think testified out there. A bunch of people. So again, a lot of this is coming out, and it is good. We need, the rehash on it, but we also have to be careful because a lot of this stuff has been either explained or in some way the story is a little different from how we thought it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago. The research and investigations have evolved, and there is different information that's out there now. I'm not saying any of it's like necessarily wrong, but when you have somebody going out on Alex Jones' show and saying that DeKalb County happened all over, that is categorically false. There's no evidence of that it happened like that. Okay. And again, I'm not saying that this didn't happen, that there wasn't fraud widespread, but it wasn't that. The DeKalb County thing was an actual human error that had down ballot consequences. Okay. Same with what we're told about Antrim County. Now, again, there could be more that would come out of that if they had allowed things like the MAC addresses and the routers to have been investigated in Antrim County, but they shut the case down the day that discovery was due. Literally the day that discovery was due, they dismissed the case up there in Antrim County. And I don't think it went any further in DeKalb County. So I'm going to end that there. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Please smash that thumbs up if you have not done so already. I appreciate you guys. Turn on the notifications. I'll be doing a lot more of these restreams over the next 4 or 5 days because I got a lot of stuff that I have to get out there, and I need to get my numbers up. And then I will probably see you again another time over this weekend live. If you see restream, it's a restream. If you see live or nothing, it's going to be me. But if it is an old episode, it will start with restream. So just letting you guys know that. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. Do I have anything else? Any other announcements? I don't think so. We're good. All right. Stay frosty. God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. Make the fortune cookie country pay for this.